Notice is hereby given of the regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Town of Westfield in the County of Union, New Jersey at 7 p.m. on the evening of Tuesday, November 16th, 2021 in Cafeteria B of Westfield High School, 550 Dorian Road, Westfield, New Jersey. Please be advised all attendees must wear masks. The purpose of the meeting is to transact the regular business of the board and to transact any other business to come properly before the board. This is to advise the general public and to instruct that it be recorded in the minutes that in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, the Westfield School Board on Thursday, November 11th, 2021, caused to be posted at the office of the Board of Education located at 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, and delivered to the Westfield Leader, the Star Ledger, the Westfield Library, Town Clerk of Westfield, Tap Into Westfield, and Patch.com, a meeting notice setting forth the time, date, and location of this meeting. Dana, could we have a roll call, please?
Sahar Aziz.
Here.
Mike Beelan. Brendan Galligan.
Here.
Robert Garrison. Layla Morelli.
Here.
Gretchen Oleg.
Here.
Tara Porto.
Here.
Sonal Patel.
Here.
Amy Root.
Here. Okay, thank you. Layla, would you lead us in the flag salute tonight, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. We're going to get started with some regular announcements, and then we have some special announcements. And tonight is a little bit different because we're sharing microphones. It's a little different for us, so if you'll just bear with us, we'll try to make sure we capture everybody so that you can hear them for the recording. Sonal, could you start us off? Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
The New Jersey School Boards Association is encouraging students to submit entries for the Garden State Film Festival's student submission category, New Jersey Hometown Documentary Short. This category is reserved for films that are written, directed, and shot by New Jersey high school students. Films must focus on some aspect of the student's hometown, including topics such as profiles of interesting persons, places, time periods, or subjects related to the arts. The deadline to submit is Friday, January 7th. For more information, visit www.njsba.org and/or the Garden State Film Festival at gsff.org.
Okay, great. Sahar?
Okay. With a score of 94.2, the Westfield High School Marching Band placed second out of 38 competing high school bands at the New Jersey Marching Band Directors Association State Championship. The competition was held at the College of New Jersey on October 31st, 2021, and the WHS Marching Blue Devils also finished second in Class AAA under the direction of band directors Trevor Sindorf and Christopher Vitale. Congratulations.
Thank you. Tara?
8 Westfield High School student musicians have been accepted into the 2021-2022 All-State Mixed and Treble Choirs, performing with the 2021 All-State Mixed Chorus in a virtual concert in a date to be announced will be Aprameo Chakravarti, Evan Leone, Skylar Lipkind, and Ryan Williamson, performing with the 2022 All-State Treble Chorus at a live concert at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center, NJPAC, in February will be Natalie Gonzalez, Sarah LaMonica, and Angelina Mora, and Eden Wilcombs. The 8 Westfield High School student vocalists were chosen from approximately 500 other student musicians from across the state who participated in virtual all-state auditions in late September and early October.
Great, thanks. Layla, do you have one?
I have 2.
2, great.
Tickets are on sale for Westfield Theater Department's production of Much Ado About Nothing. The cast and crew are looking forward to being backstage this Thursday at 4 p.m. and Friday and Saturday at 7:30 p.m. In-person and live streaming options are available. Don't miss it.
Advanced purchase tickets are required and available at whstd.booktix.com. Additionally, the Roosevelt cast and crew of Romeo and Juliet, Together and Alive at Last, will take to the stage tomorrow and Friday at 7 p.m. and on Saturday at 2 p.m. Tickets must be purchased in advance at ris.booktix.com. Live streaming is also available. We extend our congratulations to Robert Bonacchio, Kristen Sonic-Schmeltz, and Mary Wickens, who won election to the Board of Education according to unofficial results. Official results are expected to be announced this Friday, November 19th. We thank all of the candidates for their willingness to serve and their commitment to the community. Congratulations.
Thanks. Gretchen, do you have one?
I do.
Okay. Sorry, bit of a reach for your...
17 Westfield, oh, do I need to? Sorry. Figure I'm loud enough. 17 Westfield High School student athletes signed letters of intent with colleges and universities, signifying recognition of the seniors' accomplishments both academically and athletically. We'd like to congratulate the following student athletes who are going to continue to compete at the college level. I'm going to do my best with the names, y'all, so bear with me. Mateus Arbeliz, who's going to Franklin and Marshall College to play soccer. Lauren Block, Gettysburg College to play lacrosse. Kalia Kaluge, who's going to Drexel to play softball. James Chorba, who's going to play lacrosse at Monmouth. Adelaide Cummings, going to Wesleyan University to play lacrosse. Elise Fox, playing soccer at Gettysburg College. Ryan Friedberg, Cornell University, soccer. Isabel Gauthier, Stetson University, soccer. James Haley, Washington and Lee University, lacrosse. Avery Heft, University of California, Berkeley, lacrosse. Luke Jacobs, wrestling at the University of Maryland. Grace Clegg, basketball at Bucknell. Sean Logan, basketball in my home state of North Carolina for Davidson College. Olivia Macaluso, softball at Seton Hall. Mac Rokshar, soccer at Stevens Institute of Technology. Eric Webb, Providence College to play lacrosse. And Natalie Zilachowski, going to play tennis at Bates College. So congratulations, that's really quite impressive, and we wish you all the very best.
Great, thank you. Brendan?
Yes.
Sorry.
All Westfield Public Schools will be closed on Thursday, November 25th and Friday, November 26th for Thanksgiving recess. Additionally, all schools will have an early dismissal on Wednesday, November 24th.
Thank you. And the next scheduled meeting of the Board of Education will be on Tuesday, December 14th, here in Cafeteria B at Westfield High School. Please enter at the door nearest the back parking lot off Rahway Avenue. All attendees are required to wear a mask. The meeting will also be live streamed via the district YouTube channel, which you can access by clicking on Board Meeting Recordings Current Year on the board tab at www.westfieldnjk12.org. Just a small difference, we were hoping that tonight's meeting would also be live streamed on that same channel, and we've just heard that we're having some difficulties with that this evening. So if any of you instructed family members to tune in to see anything tonight, they're going to have to catch it when the recording becomes available on that same tab of the district website in a couple of days. So hopefully we'll get it up and running for next time. And the complete agenda of the meeting will be available on Friday, December 10th, also on the board tab on the district website. So that's the last of the regular announcements that I mentioned. And now is the fun part where we get to recognize some of our students and welcome them here with their families. We are pleased to welcome here tonight 8 Westfield High School students who have received special honors from the College Board National Recognition Programs. Senior Celia Frank has been named a 2021-2022 National African American Scholar. Seniors Taylor Addis, Blake Barretz, Mateo Beltran, John Gonzalez, Manuel Gonzalez, Amira Lee, and Victoria Vaca have been named 2021-2022 2022 National Hispanic American Scholars. According to the College Board, the program honors academically outstanding students from underrepresented communities each year who score in the top 10% of the state on qualifying tests and maintain a grade point average of 3.5 or higher. Congratulations to all of you on this tremendous achievement. When I call your name, please come to the front of the room to accept a certificate of recognition from our superintendent, Dr. Gonzalez, and then please move onto the stage for a group photograph. Your families will have the opportunity to take a picture too. Celia Frank, could you come up? Okay. Taylor Addis? Is Taylor here? Blake Barretts? Mateo Beltran? John Gonzalez? Manuel Gonzalez? Amira Lee? And Victoria Vaca. Okay. And Dr. Gonzalez, would it be all right if we have the group come up here so we can have a slightly better backdrop? Okay, I see. Okay. And truly, parents, come on up and fill in here so you can get a better picture. We know it's a wonderful achievement, and we want you to have a record of it for yourselves. All right. Congratulations again. Thanks for joining us. All right, and just for the record, no relation, Dr. Gonzalez, is that correct?
No relation.
Just a happy coincidence.
Absolutely.
All right, great. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us, folks. Keep up the good work. Thanks. They did. Look at that. All right. Okay. Moving along, Dr. Gonzalez, you have some words for us on the superintendent's report, I believe.
Yes, just this evening, I do not have a formal presentation, but I would like to share some comments regarding the last month. So much goes into running a school district, and every day, week, or month, there are so many accomplishments. You read about them on our website, like student achievement, for example, or even on our social media or in our coverage by our local media. Other efforts occur without much fanfare as administrators and teachers devote their considerable energy and expertise to supporting the Westfield Public Schools. Each month, I share highlights of those efforts and accomplishments with our board, and tonight I'd like to share that snapshot with what took place in October. Beginning with 3 new STEM courses were introduced to the Board Curriculum Instruction and Programs Committee and are on tonight's agenda for first reading approval by the board. Those STEM courses include Introduction to Architecture, Architecture 2, and Computer-Aided Design, or CAD. The Start Strong assessments were successfully administered in all of the tested grades, and we now have access to raw preliminary data with summary district reports to come later. The state has announced it will provide individual student reports to parents later this month. The October 11th in-service for staff was a productive day of professional growth centered around the district goals. And as part of district goal number 3, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee has completed a draft of guiding principles, and several administrators attended a 3-day virtual session on diversifying the teacher workforce. We look forward to sharing more on the committee's work as the work gets underway this year. Work on the 2022-2023 tentative budget is already underway, even though we're about 3 months into the current school year. All of our planning is already taking place for next. We continue to work to improve our facilities with a number of projects completed last month, including bathroom renovations at Jefferson and Washington, and renovations of certain classrooms at Roosevelt and Jefferson. The first phase of the HVAC renovation project at our elementary schools is complete, and ongoing work to replace certain classroom doors and install security doors at the high school and intermediate schools is nearing completion as well. The October edition of the newsletter was emailed to families and staff and is posted on our district website. This issue focuses on student wellness and the safety and security of the school community. As I mentioned in the newsletter, I've been inspired by the learning taking place in our schools, but I also know that the transition to full-time in-person instruction is not without its challenges, and academic and social emotional supports are more important than ever. Our students continue to excel academically and athletically. They are amazing, but not just their work in the classroom and on the field. Many students also volunteer their time to give back to the community through food and clothing drives, book collections, writing letters to U.S. troops, and other charitable endeavors. Keep an eye on the district website and social media for news of all these wonderful achievements. At our schools, there were successful back-to-school nights, Week of Respect activities, picture days, PTO book fairs, Halloween parades, and walk to school day at the elementary level. All of this adds up to a welcoming sense of normalcy. We're not at a pre-COVID normalcy, but I remain hopeful. In the meantime, I'm grateful to all of our students, staff, and families for continuing to work together to keep our school community safe and healthy. That concludes my report this evening.
Okay, great, thank you. All right. Okay, any questions or comments about Dr. Gonzalez's words? Okay, all right. Then we will move along to the first opportunity for public comment. During this portion of the meeting, district residents and staff are invited to address the Board of Education on agenda items only. The board requests that individuals state their name and address for the record and asks that all remarks be directed to me as board president and not to individual members of the Board of Education or staff. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding personnel matters are discouraged and cannot be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. The board bears no responsibility, nor will it be liable for any comments made by members of the public. If a matter concerning a district staff member is of interest or concern to a resident, the matter should be referred to the responsible building principal, superintendent of schools, or the Board of Education, either by telephone, letter, or email. Although the board may not respond to items raised during the public forum, all public comments will be considered. Please note that if any member of the public becomes disruptive during the meeting, the board president may terminate the participant's statement Continued disruptions may result in removal from the meeting or adjournment of the meeting. Each speaker's statement will be limited to 3 minutes in duration. In previous meetings, we've had people raise their hand to be acknowledged, to walk up to the podium. I would suggest tonight, in the interest of expediency, if there are several people who'd like to speak, if you'd like to form a line along this side of the cafeteria, keeping in mind social distancing, that way you'll be ready to be the next speaker. So would anyone like to start us off for public comment tonight? Come on up. And again, just because you're our first public commenter tonight, if you could just state your name and address for the record, please.
Okay, it's Camille Pripp, 1113 Columbus Avenue. Okay, I'm here today to make known my objections to the book The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. I know this book is being considered as a book for the new course American Studies. I see that this book is currently on the list of approved readings for 11th graders, that is mostly 16 and 17-year-olds. Right now, my 12th grade son has been assigned to read it in his English class. Dispersed throughout the book are graphic, sexually explicit scenes depicting a pedophile raping his 11-year-old daughter, as well as several scenes depicting what goes on in a pedophile's mind and why he finds little girls sexually attractive. I emailed the teacher regarding my disapproval and mentioned my worry about the impact this reading may have on a student who may have been sexually molested. After all, you never know what may be going on in a student's life. She wrote me back stating that there are, quote, protocols in place to identify those students, understand their concerns, and address them. However, what about those students who are just too embarrassed to speak up and go along with having to read the assigned text? This is a very sensitive topic to have to discuss and admit to dealing with. Wouldn't it be traumatizing to a girl who has been sexually abused to read a book about a girl being sexually abused by her father? Would she want to read a book explicitly detailing the violent, incestuous rape of a child? Where is the decency and compassion here? This is assigned reading. A book detailing sexual violence against a minor that is required as assigned reading by minors is completely inappropriate. I would be horrified if one of my daughters, who are currently in the 10th grade, had to read it next year for assigned reading. I'm worried about the words in this book possibly damaging children, not only those who have, they themselves, been abused, but also those of an extremely sensitive nature. One of my daughters is a true empath, and I know reading this would be disturbing to her. She can easily place herself in another person's shoes, and who would want to be in the shoes of an 11-year-old girl that is being raped with graphic detail? When I talk about graphic detail, the book goes into explicit detail of the feelings of the pedophile as he rapes his daughter, how exciting it is to him. He talks about the breasts of little girls. Parts of the book are written from the point of view of a pedophile and from the point of view of the girl being molested. In one passage, there's a letter written to God speaking about the breasts of little girls, commanding the pedophile to touch them. He couldn't keep his hands, his mouth off of them. He speaks of, quote, the touch, taste, and feel of them. The pedophile talks about his sexual cravings, how homosexuality, bestiality, and sodomy were out of the question. How, quote, the one thing that disgusted him more than entering and caressing a woman was caressing and being caressed by a man. Therefore, his attention settled on, quote, humans whose bodies were least offensive, children, but not little boys, because they were, quote, insulting, scary, and stubborn, but to little girls. They were, quote, frequently seductive to him. The pedophile talks further on about how when he dies, quote, the little girls are the only thing he'll miss. He states that when he touched their sturdy little tits, sorry to say that, and bit them just a little, he felt like he was being friendly. The writer also describes the relationship of the pedophile with his wife. There's a very explicit scene talking about the actual act of sex, quote, his hands between her legs, how she's, quote, soft and wet, where his fingers are strong and hard. And this isn't even the worst of it. The parts detailing the father raping his daughter are absolutely horrific.
Thank you. Okay. Time's up. Okay.
Jen Andretta, 722 Warren Street. I would like to continue on with what Mrs. Pripp just spoke about, which is curriculum item number 1, page 11.5, regarding the book, The Bluest Eyes. I'd like to read an excerpt as you make your decision as to whether or not children should be reading this. The tenderness welled up in him, and he sank to his knees, his eyes on the foot of his daughter. Crawling on all fours toward her, he raised his hand and caught the foot in an upward stroke. Pecola lost her balance and was about to careen to the floor. Jolie raised his other hand to her hips to save her from falling. He put his head down and nibbled at the back of her leg. His mouth trembled at the firm sweetness of the flesh. He closed his eyes, letting his fingers dig into her waist. The rigidness of her shocked body, the silence of her stunned throat, was better than Pauline's easy laughter had been. The confused mixture of his memories of Pauline and the doing of a wild and forbidden thing excited him, and a bolt of desire ran down his genitals, giving it length and softening the lips of his anus. Surrounding all of this lust was a border of politeness. He wanted to fuck her, tenderly, but the tenderness would not hold. The tightness of her vagina was more than he could bear. His soul seemed to slip down to his guts and fly out into her, and the gigantic thrust he made into her then provoked the only sound she made, a hollow suck of air in the back of her throat, like the rapid loss of air from a circus balloon. Following the disintegration, the falling away of sexual desire, he was conscious of her wet, soapy hands on his wrists, the fingers clenching, but whether her grip was from a hopeless but stubborn struggle to be free or from some other emotion he could not tell. Removing himself from her was so painful to him, he cut it short and snatched his genitals out of the dry harbor of her vagina. She appeared to have fainted. Jolie stood up and could see only her grayish panties so sad and limp around her ankles. Again, the hatred mixture with tenderness. The hatred would not let him pick her up. The tenderness forced him to cover her. So when the child regained consciousness, she was lying on the kitchen floor under a heavy quilt, trying to connect the pain between her legs with the face of her mother looming over her. I do not think this is appropriate for teenagers to be reading. As someone that feels passionate about rape, I don't have a problem with it being spoken about, but to detail how a man feels when he is raping his daughter is not appropriate for children.
Sorry, I gotta open up my notes here. This is a very different topic. There's a lot of heaviness. I'm Erin Skirtle. I live at 16 Normandy Drive. I actually have a third and a first grade student at Tamaulipas, and I spent this fall attending the Westfield Soccer Association practices and games. While we were milling about on the sidelines.
I'm sorry, is this about an agenda item? Or is this
about the Edison Fields?
Which we are not voting on tonight. It's not an agenda item, so we have a second portion for public comment.
Okay.
For items such as that.
My apologies.
No,
Thank you.
No problem at all.
I'll wait.
Yeah, no, I know it's a little hard to understand sometimes, but thank you for following the rules. Yeah. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Ash Nangia, 526 Hillcrest Avenue. So I'm going to continue on with another excerpt from this book, The Bluest Eyes. You know, if I were to come in here as a grown man and express these as my desires, I'd imagine that I'd probably be lynched or arrested. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you what this book says. It's very appalling. Here we go. But someday I will die. I was always so kind. Why do I have to die? The little girls. The little girls are the only things I'll miss. Do you know that when I touched their sturdy little tits and bit them just a little, I felt I was being friendly. I didn't want to kiss their mouths or sleep in the bed with them or take a child bride for my own. Playful I felt and friendly, not like the newspaper said, not like the people whispered. And I didn't mind at all, not at all. Remember how so many of them came back? No wonder, or no one would even try to understand that. If I'd been hurting them, would they have come back? Two of them, Doreen and Sugar Babe, they'd come together. I gave them mints, money, and they'd eat ice cream with their legs open while I played with them. It was like a party. And there wasn't nastiness, and there wasn't any filth, and there wasn't any odor. There wasn't any groaning, just the light, white laughter of little girls and me. And there wasn't any look, any long, funny look, any long, funny Velma look afterward. No look that makes you feel dirty afterward. That makes you want to die. With little girls, it is all clean and good and friendly. You know, we went, from the last time that I addressed you guys on the Our Skin book, we went from Black Lives Matter to white people are evil to white people are oppressors. Now I hear there's another book in the elementary school about the ABCs. S is for sex, T is for trans. How about S is for shoe and T is for tree? You know, and now we're coming to this level of graphic sex, pornography, child porn, and pedophilia. I don't understand how we get to this point. I think that you guys really need to consider what I'm saying, what these parents are saying, and get this book out of here. It's bad news. Supposedly this book is supposed to cover the issue of how blacks and the stuff they dealt with during the Great Depression and after the Great Depression. There's so many resources that you guys can pull to teach that stuff. Why you would go to this book, I don't know. I don't know who proposed it, but it's before you guys, and I hope you're going to do the right thing and shut this down. Thank you.
Jill Baker. I live on Baker Avenue. I'm also reading from The Bluest Eye. I want him to put his hand between my legs. I pretend to wake up and turn to him, but not opening my legs. I want him to open them for me. He does, and I be soft and wet where his fingers are strong and hard. I be softer than I ever been before. All my strength in my hand. My brain curls up like wilted leaves. A funny, empty feeling is in my hands. I want to grab hold of something, so I hold his head. His mouth is under my chin. Then I don't want his hand between my legs no more, because I think I am softening away. I stretch my legs open, and he is on top of me, too heavy to hold, too light not to. He puts his thing in me, in me, in me. I wrap my feet around his back so he can't get away. His face is next to mine. The bed springs sound like them crickets used to back home. He puts his fingers in mine, and we stretch our arms outwise like Jesus on the cross. I hold on tight. My fingers and my feet hold on tight because everything else is going. I know he wants me to come first. I'm going to stop reading because I think you get the gist of it. This is truly horrifying that this is already in our school and it's on the proposal for another class. When I was a student 20 years ago in this building, if I had read a book like this as a virgin, forced to read this filth, I would have been mortified and humiliated. This is pornography, and it has no place in the public school system. I want to change direction and read some quotes written by board members after the December 21st, 2021 Board of Ed meeting. While I was thrilled to see the room, these are quotes, packed with residents exercising their democratic right to communicate their concerns with their elected officials, I am deeply troubled by the level of hostility, incivility, and aggression directed at me. Yesterday convinced me that the members of our community clearly have a problem with incivility, sexism, and racism. I wanted to let you know that I will not be attending any board meetings in person unless we have a police presence in the room. I want to say the fact that parents are coming forward with valid concerns about their own children has triggered board members to ask for police presence is horrendous. The anger and unruliness that arose at certain board meetings had nothing to do with anyone's race, culture, religion, sex. It had everything to do with parents standing up together and fighting for the rights and protection of their children. Parents who have come to board meetings in order to be heard, and while we speak, we watch board members roll their eyes, share exacerbated sighs, pick up their phones, and continue to ignore us. We see what you write about us, you call us laymen, and want us to leave you to the educating. No, we're not going to remain silent any longer. The district has been sneaking in filth like The Bluest Lie and white supremacy books like Our Skin under our noses, and we're done. We're the parents, and you're going to start answering to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Emily Barker, 434 Longfellow. First, I'd like to read a small passage from The Bluest Eye, taken from page 87. White kids, his mother did not like him to play with the N-word. She had explained to him the difference between color people and the N-word. Notice I'm not saying the full word because it's inappropriate. They were easily identifiable. Colored people were neat and quiet. The N-word were dirty and loud. Then later in the page, Junior used to long to play with the black boys. More than anything in the world, he wanted to play King of the Mountain and have them push him down on the mound of dirt and roll over him. He wanted to feel their hardness pressing on him, smell their wild blackness, and say, "Fuck you," with that lovely casualness. For all of the focus and concern on diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially when it comes to black and brown students, I'm surprised that this district has no regard for derogatory slang being used so outright, in addition to the explicit sexual content that has been read this evening. Exactly what literary value does this book hold in this district that the district feels so strongly in their convictions to not only use this text in an English class, but now to suggest its use in this new American Studies class as a textbook? Since there are many objecting parents to their child reading The Bluest Eye, the school district should consider giving parents a heads up when controversial material like this is planned, and also give parents an opt-out option for their children. There should be an alternative book that could be read. In regards to the American Studies class, it seems that this is the second elective being proposed that focuses on the perceived systemic racism in our country. For all of the diversity talk in this district, diversity of opinion does not exist. This district should consider a class that seeks to discuss how American culture and government is superior to achieving equality versus a country that is, say, communist or socialist, or a class that analyzes the topic of immigration and explains why hundreds and thousands of African and South American immigrants, as well as European immigrants, continue to seek life in America. Conservative-leaning Board of Ed candidates received over 10,000 votes, so understand this is not a small number of people looking for a balance from the wokeness in this district. I would urge the board to seek ways to balance their objectives.
Mary Rittenhouse, 1703 Boynton Avenue. I'm also going to continue reading a extract from the book of Bluest Eyes. You remember, do you, how and of what we are made? Let me tell you now about the breasts of little girls. I apologize for the inappropriateness. Is that it? The imbalance of loving them at awkward times of day and in awkward places, and the tastelessness of loving those which belong to members of my family. Do I have to apologize for loving strangers? But you too are amiss here, Lord. How, why did you allow it to happen? How is it I could lift my eyes from the contemplation of your body and fall deeply into the contemplation of theirs? The buds on some of these saplings. They were mean, you know, mean and tender. Mean little buds resisting the touch, springing like rubber. But aggressive, daring me to touch. Commanding me to touch. Not a bit shy, as you'd suppose. They stuck out at me, oh yes, at me. Slender-chested, finger-chested lassies. Have you ever seen them, Lord? I mean, really seen them. One could not see them and not love them. You who made them must have considered them lovely even as an idea. How much more lovely is the manifestation of that idea? I couldn't, as you must recall, keep my mouth off them. Salt sweet. Like not quite ripe strawberries, covered with the light salt sweat of running days and hopping, skipping, jumping hours. The love of them, the touch, taste, and feel of them, was not just an easy, luxurious human vice. They were for me a thing to do instead. I have a 9th grader, and if she came home reading this book, I'd be outraged and disgusted. I've read some other extracts, which is absolutely outrageous. I've never seen anything in my entire life. I've come from Europe, never seen anything like this, grew up there, never seen anything like this in school systems. And I'm an immigrant, 21 years here. And, you know, we came here because United States, mixed communities, great school systems. We came to Westfield because of the great school systems. I'm a little disappointed, I have to say, as many people are currently disappointed looking at, you know, what's being taught in schools and the divisions that it's causing. I hope you look into this really deeply. You who have children, just think, would you want your kids to be reading this? Are you comfortable with your kids reading this? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Kyle George, 605 Short Hills Court. I'm going to cover 3 things on the agenda tonight, so I've got to move pretty quickly. First item, bylaws 0164 and 0167. These bylaws govern the organization and conduct of meetings, including public participation. They were last revised 2 years ago, and they are only due for scheduled review every 6 years. Yet you prioritize changing them now. These drafts have changed between the first reading on October 5th and now in a substantive way, and thus they should be considered a new first reading. Additionally, bylaw 0131 requires that you give 10 days advance notice to BOE members before bylaw changes are on the agenda for the first time. Did that happen? These revised bylaws put new restrictions on parents who want to speak, grant new powers to the superintendent and BOE president, like the enhanced ability to shut the meeting down and add agenda items with little to no notice, and put the burden on BOE members to do their own research on every item on the agenda before the meeting. With 48-hour notice on agendas and last-minute changes, how is that possible? Why are you all voting for this? The superintendent and staff should be providing you all the information you need to make a responsible vote, not asking you to essentially file Oprah requests for it. You're doing it now because you didn't like the August meeting where you were surprised by vocal parents. You're prioritizing it over other much-needed policy revisions like the controversial issues policy that was tabled in June and hasn't seen the light of day since. Second item, policy 6160, grants from private sources. The current policy requires that, quote, the board will be notified of all grant proposals before being submitted to the funding agency. Prior board approval is required when the grant proposal would impact district budget, facilities, or programs, end quote. To translate this, you have to vote on it before accepting the check. This policy was clearly violated in 2020 with the WEF funding of the Racial Literacy Initiative. According to Oprah documents, administrators rushed to accept funds and spent them in August of 2020. Yet the board did not vote on this grant until September and October of 2020 after the funds were accepted and spent. In the October 2020 meeting, a parent asked for a WEF-funded book list, and Dr. Pinero said it couldn't be provided, yet they had already been purchased in August. The newly proposed policy language has been changed to exactly match what actually happened in 2020. Is this an ex post facto policy change? What are the consequences for violating that policy in 2020? Third item, proposed American Studies course. The tone of some sections of the proposed American Studies course seem like Power and Privilege 2.0. The course only studies America post-World War I, and everything written in the syllabus is from a deconstructionist perspective. From the syllabus, American Studies is explored through the lens of 4 themes: illusions, perception, conformity, and power. The more accurate title for this course would be Introduction to Post-World War I Progressive Ideology. Will you consider renaming it to reflect its real content? Will the authors of the course be made available to answer questions from the public, or will this be a repeat of the 2019 Power and Privilege course where that request was denied? Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else for public comment at this point? Okay. Dr. Gonzalez, anything you want to address first? Or?
No, there's...
Okay. A couple of the items that were raised during public comment we will be addressing when we discuss the items that we're voting on under policies and under curriculum. So I think we'll go ahead and discuss those at that point. Just wondering if anything else.
No, there are comments.
No, I think it's probably better addressed when we get to that portion of the agenda, which again is why we take public comment in 2 portions at our meetings. We do ask for public comment up front if it affects something that we are voting on tonight, because we do want to hear from the public, and then of course on other items that we're not taking action on tonight, we have that second public comment later in our meeting. Not every district does it that way. Some only offer 1 public comment portion, but we've done it that way for years and we find it helpful. We are going to be revising the policies as we said, when we get to that point. So we'll explain the revisions a little bit better, but really our intention is to increase transparency and make it easier to attend meetings and comment. All right. Moving on, I would like the board to approve the minutes of October 19th, 2021 board meeting minutes and the private minutes of October 19th, 2021 as well. I have a second. Thank you, Brendan. All in favor of approving those minutes? Aye. Any abstentions? No. Okay. All right. Moving on with the order of the meeting, I would like the board to consider personnel items 1 through 30. Can I have a second? Thank you, Leila. All right. I think we do have an item to call out, correct? Yep. Dr. Gonzalez?
Yes, tonight I'm announcing with regret the retirement of 2 staff members who have given a total of almost 50 years of service to Westfield Public Schools. Kathleen Legal has worked in the district since 1998, first as a conscientious paraprofessional at Edison and then as a secretary in the main office there. Currently, Kathy is a secretary in the Special Services Department, where her colleagues enjoy working with her. Her thoroughness and attention to detail make her a valuable addition to that department. For more than 26 years, Rosemary O'Shea has been a dedicated employee where she has made a difference in every position she has held. She began her career as a substitute secretary at Roosevelt and then came to Elm Street, where she worked in the Human Resources Department and in the Office of Curriculum Instruction and Programs. Lincoln School was happy to welcome her as the first head secretary of their Early Childhood and Kindergarten Center 10 years ago. 10 years ago, Rosemary returned to Elm Street in the role of executive secretary to the superintendent. Rosemary takes great pride in her work and has been a respected resource for the superintendent, as well as staff and colleagues. With her years of experience and depth of institutional knowledge, her contribution will be felt for a long time. We wish both Kathy and Rosemary happy and healthy retirements.
Thank you. I had no idea all the backstory on Rosemary O'Shea. I've only known her since her position at Elm Street. We board members interacted with her frequently, so we will miss her and wish her all the best in her retirement. Any other comments?
Just like to wish Rosemary a happy, long retirement. She will be missed dearly by the board. As one of the 2 secretaries in the superintendent's office, she's one of the few district employees that we deal with regularly, and the wealth of, the depth of knowledge that she had, particularly when it comes to policy and compliance, is second to none, and we're trying to figure it out on our own right now. So, congratulations, Rosemary.
There's no other comments? No? Okay. Roll call, please.
Sahar Aziz? Yes. Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Leila Morelli?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Tara Porto?
Yes.
Sonal Patel?
Yes.
Amy Root?
Yes. Thank you. All right, moving on. Some of our committee chairs are absent this evening, so Brendan and I will be doing a little double duty. Brendan, facilities?
Yep. Giving the facilities report for Mike tonight. We first heard a request from, the Facilities Committee met on October 22nd. The first item on our agenda was the Boosters Club had requested to hang signs along the fence on Rahway Avenue. They have, currently along the fence at Kaler and the varsity baseball field, they sell advertisements to local businesses. It helps fund many of their initiatives, which then come back directly to us. We had some questions, and I believe the final decision was to hit pause on that suggestion, as we weren't sure it was the appropriate venue without creating a hazard for traffic or really irritating the neighbors who would be directly facing the signs on Rahway Avenue. So while we do appreciate the Boosters for their continued support, their request just wasn't appropriate for us at this point in time. We haven't closed the door on that, but at this time, nothing's proceeding. We also heard a noise complaint about one of the new HVAC units installed at McKinley. An immediate neighbor who's about 50 feet from the unit complained about the noise. That was before the fencing was put up and no landscaping has yet been planted, so the situation will be resolved. But when a complaint comes in, we do take it seriously. Sean and I believe Sean met with George and the neighbor and talked about a plan, and the neighbor is satisfied. And since they're my neighbor, I haven't heard anything, so. We've also continued expanding digital controls to all of our HVAC units in the district. There's been a request to allow the schools to control the units in their multi-purpose rooms directly. Right now, everything is centralized through our energy auditor, our energy managers. And the schools have some ability to control up and down a couple degrees. The schools wanted more exclusive control over those units, and that does not align with district goals for energy conservation and effective ventilation. At some points they wanted to turn them off because they were noisy, but that defeats the purpose of having ventilation, particularly when everybody's masking. So that was also declined. We continued talking about the Edison fields, full-day kindergarten, which Gretchen will touch on later with the long-range planning report. And we had a request from the Westfield Soccer Association to renovate the field at Elm Street. We are continuing to work with them on that, but the costs are going to be significantly higher than they initially planned because we're required to work with prevailing wage and approved bidders because it's school property. And that is it for the last thing has to do with an issue we're dealing with tonight, which is scheduling for audio and video personnel and equipment. We're looking to, we don't allow outside groups that use our auditoriums to use the sound equipment, and if they do, if they need it, we require they use a district employee. So scheduling that has always been somewhat difficult, particularly when two schools want to do something at the same time. We just have to, scheduling has to be done more centrally for the auditoriums. And that is it for facilities. Our next meeting is this Friday. Any questions?
I have a quick question. At a prior meeting, we had a couple of parents talk about the issue of block scheduling, and we've had some emails. And I'm just wondering to what extent there's an intersection with facilities in terms of prior discussions about limitations in facilities that may affect whether or not we can seriously consider block scheduling.
Yes. So that hasn't fallen to facilities yet. It has come up in policies last week, and will come up in SIP, I believe, in December. But it's something the district is actively exploring for the high school level. And once we know what it would have to look like, then we'll know what limitations we have. But it is something that is being actively pursued by a number of committees, but it hasn't yet made it to facilities.
Thank you.
May I ask a question? I'm sorry. It's just hard to hear, so could someone rephrase the question?
Yes, sorry. The question was about block scheduling at the high school. A parent had made a comment at a prior board meeting about block scheduling, as opposed to our current 1 through 9 high school schedule. There are numerous variations on block scheduling that would allow longer class periods, maybe not every day for the same course. And Sahara's question was about whether the facilities committee had examined that in terms of do our current facilities meet the needs for such a program?
Okay, and could you just rephrase your answer?
Absolutely. Sorry, I was talking to Sahara and it didn't pick up on the microphone. The block scheduling has come up in policies and will come up in the curriculum committee in December. Once we have an idea of what block scheduling might actually look like, then the facility needs can be addressed if there's a deficiency. But right now, it's too abstract of a concept to figure out if there's any deficiencies at all.
I just want to add, for those who don't know, one of the reasons, there's many reasons for supporting or opposing block scheduling, but one issue is the homework issue. And so to the extent that you will have high school students, because mine has certainly commented on this, is apparently one of the benefits, according to some students, is if you have block scheduling, then you don't have homework in every subject every day. And that's just one particular factor, and there's of course a debate about that, but that is something to the extent that there are parents that are concerned about homework, block scheduling I think is relevant to that question or that issue.
And as Brendan said, it has come up in a previous policies meeting. Curriculum is going to be addressing it as well. We'll talk about it a little bit when we meet later this week, but we expect to hear more about it on the subject at our December meeting, so we'll have more to report back at that point. It is a subject of some interest for the high school, and has been for many a year, actually. So it's something that comes up, is considered, is tabled, comes up again, is considered, is tabled. This is, I think, probably a more robust attempt at discussion and an attempt at putting arms around than I have seen in my 5 years on the board. But I know, so we'll be hearing more in the curriculum committee in December from the group at the high school that's currently doing some research and some site visits at other schools to learn more about benefits and challenges with block scheduling. So, okay. All right, nothing to vote on for facilities this evening. All right, so we will move on to long-range planning.
Sure.
To Gretchen.
Yes.
Thank you. So we had a long-range planning meeting this afternoon immediately prior to the board meeting, so I would encourage board members to look at our communal notes on the portal. We talked primarily about full-day kindergarten and sort of just to sort of take a step back on the history of where we've been with full-day kindergarten. Immediately prior to the pandemic, we were exploring the possibility of some private space that might be available to the district to lease. And that opportunity is no longer available to us post-pandemic. So we had to sort of go back to where we were before that, which was recreating the numbers that we had and the demographics that we had to have full-day kindergarten in Westfield. And I don't think any of this hasn't been publicly spoken about before, but we would need about 12 classrooms in addition to the 9 available classrooms that we have at Lincoln. And so the figures that we had for the cost of constructing those classrooms were at least a few years old. And I think, as we all know, the cost of construction, the cost of materials, everything has substantially increased since the pandemic has happened. So Dana had an opportunity to regroup on those figures with our engineers, and while we have rough estimates, they've increased substantially. So we have the issue of the building of the facilities, which is probably somewhere between $14 and $18 million, and then which would need a bond referendum, and then along with that, once the facilities are built, we would of course need an increase in our operating budget to staff them, right? Because we don't currently have the staff to teach those additional classrooms. So there's a timing element too. And so a lot of the conversation tonight was about dovetailing that conversation a little bit more closely with not only budget, projections for the next few years, but the overall facilities review that Dr. Gonzalez is doing with our administrators in the district. And so it's an active conversation. I don't have anything definitive to report other than, we continue to sort of explore it, that there's a definite interest in trying to see what it would require for us to have full-day kindergarten in Westfield. And today was the first time that we really got some definitive figures around that. So conversation continues. It is our last long-range planning committee meeting of 2021, but I'm confident that the board's going to continue to work on this moving forward. I don't know if anybody else who was there has anything to add to the conversation about full-day K.
No, I would just add that I understand that there's probably some impatience among members of the community as to why have we not addressed this yet. It is a complicated situation in our district simply because a lot of other districts that have been able to achieve integrating full-day kindergarten have done so because they've had additional space available. And perhaps those of you who are parents who have kids in the schools realize that we're really using all available space currently and don't have extra space, even spaces that we might not have been able to consider using for instructional use are being used for instructional use now. So it's going to be a bigger solution than simply creating additional classrooms for just full-day kindergarten, which is why, as we start to get our arms around the whole picture, we really are not rushing to implement something immediately, because we think it really needs to be part of a more holistic approach, and so we need to consider other factors as well.
I had a question.
Yeah.
When I was at the Jefferson, I don't know if you can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
No? Okay.
Closer.
When I was at the Jefferson executive board meeting, they brought up the question of what happens if full-day kindergarten is mandated. And I thought that was an interesting question, and I was just trying to think outside of the box and wondered and hopefully that's not something that happens, eminently, but if it was, or maybe hopefully it is something that happens eminently, but if that did happen, would it be possible to pay tuition for our students to the existing preschools? Has that something that's ever been explored? I don't know, I'm new on the board, but like to pay the Presbyterian tuition from the district, to pay the St. Paul's tuition from the district, it would have to, obviously their program would have to be under our guidance then, but to solve the space issue, how sometimes you'll send a child out of district, someone from Mountainside may go to Westfield, or Westfield may go to Berkeley Heights, or whatever. Is that something that's ever been discussed for figuring out kind of some of the space issues?
Go ahead, Brendan.
Several years ago, when we first started this conversation, we had approached the Y, or they had approached us, I forget, about leasing space from the Bauer branch. So utilizing existing space. I don't think there's ever been any serious consideration of utilizing existing programs, simply because staff certifications, curriculum, it would be much harder for us to control and ensure compliance that way. But Dana, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add there.
So, well, I would doubt it's going to get mandated, first of all. I wouldn't worry about that, because for the state, if they can mandate it, they're going to pay for it. And most of the districts that don't have it right now are districts that look like Westfield. So I don't think the state's going to pay for that anytime soon. That is an option if we were mandated to do something. There are districts that do that with kindergarten and/or pre-K, if they're mandated to have pre-K, certain districts are. That would probably be an expensive option for us. So we would try, I think, to do it in a different way if it were to be mandated. But we would, I think, if it were to be mandated, we'd have enough time to move ahead with some other option.
Dana, if we did something like that, would the facilities have to comply with our return? So it would be a matter of not only making sure that licensure of teachers was one way, but we'd have to bring the facilities up to what's required for our buildings as well, right?
Yeah, most likely, yes. Yes, but I'm pretty sure if they would mandate it, we would have enough time that we would probably move forward with the option. They'd also, if they were going to mandate it, they'd also have to put a mechanism in place that we could get the funding. Right now, that's our issue, is that we don't have the funding to do the construction. And then if we had that funding, we don't have the funding in the operating budget. So the state would have to take some of those obstacles away from us if they were to mandate it. So if they mandate it, I think we could figure it out.
Right. And the only other thing I wanted to note was that even we need to be thoughtful about just the cost of a bond. Just the fact that if we were to go out to bond, the cost to get to get our specifications and all of the legal costs associated with that, and it's not like we have, lots of hundreds of thousands of dollars lying around to facilitate just sort of dipping our toe in the water and seeing what's what and how it turns out. So I just think we're trying to be thoughtful, and I appreciate that it's been a conversation that we've been having for a while. We're trying to pivot as quickly as we can, so.
And just to reiterate, Layla, I think that's a great idea for space, but it is a twofold, it's space and the operating budget. So we're really, that was what our long discussion was prior to this meeting in the long-range planning committee.
Yeah, and the WEA would definitely want the teachers to be part of their association, which would negate any possible cost savings in that direction.
Okay, so we'll continue. Go ahead, sorry, you have just a point?
Just a little bit of curious about history or some idea of budget, because obviously we can't talk about full-day kindergarten without talking about money, which relates to the facilities. And my understanding is that before the COVID pandemic, there was a referendum. There was something that was supposed to go to vote or no?
There was discussion.
There was just discussion.
Trust me, you'll know when there's a referendum. Well, because we really have to kick communications into very high gear, which is certainly a factor too when we talk about doing these things.
But I guess I'm just to the extent that there was at least ballpark figures, what amount of money are we talking about realistically? Ballpark figures, general estimates to have a full-day kindergarten.
So construction, as Gretchen talked about, is somewhere between 14, maybe $18 million, depending on when we actually would move forward with this. The operating budget, at a minimum, would be $3.1 million. The issue that we have with the operating budget is, well, there's a lot of issues, but the timing of a bond referendum for the construction would have to come before the separate proposal for the operating budget. And that's just because of the way the state requirements are. So we would be already constructing 2 additions for the program before we would be able to get the operating budget approved. So if the operating budget wasn't approved, we'd now have 18 classrooms or whatever the number turned out to be at that time without any staff to work in them. So that's one of the major issues we have, as well as the fact that we're operating under a 2% cap on our tax levy. And our costs, like everybody else's, our costs are increasing by more than 2%, especially this year. Our transportation costs are very high. Our health insurance is running very high, largely due to people not getting treated for a year or 18 months and now are seeking treatment. So we're facing a tough budget next year already, and by adding $3 million or whatever to the budget down the line would just continue to make the issue of the 2% cap harder to sustain programs that we currently have.
So in other words, if we, let's say, hypothetically speaking, there's a bond that raises $14 to $18 million, because presumably we do not have that in reserves.
Right.
I'm pretty sure you have.
Correct.
And then we need $3 million to actually run the program.
Right.
That $3 million has to come from that 2% increase. That cannot be added to our operating budget through some special vote or some special.
So it can. Yeah. It can. It would be, but that vote would have to happen at a different time that the bond referendum had to happen. So so you'd already be constructing the facility without knowing that you have the operating money to staff the program.
Right, but the vote's from the public or from the board?
From the public.
The public.
Ah.
Both would be subject to the public.
They can vote no on the second one.
Right.
Okay. So ultimately, the Westfield residents have to decide, right, if they want a full-day kindergarten and at what cost?
Correct.
Okay.
Well,
Correct.
And we have to do a very good job of marketing it to make sure that everybody understands that it's a 2-part vote. Otherwise, we risk, as Tara was saying, the chance that we have 18 brand-new classrooms and 0 teachers to staff them.
Okay. So that conversation will continue even after Gretchen leaves us at the end of December. So, but yeah, we definitely wanted to share with you all, that we continue to have the discussions. It's complicated, but we will continue to do our best to survey staff and administration for their needs and their thoughts on the subject, and we'll continue to report back here at the board meetings. Okay. Well, thank you, Gretchen. I'm happy you've had some reports these last couple of meetings. I know that was a little hard there for a while when we had to focus more on short term than on long range. All right, moving on to policies. Brendan?
Yep. All right. Policy committee met last week. We reviewed several policies, revised several. I'll just work through the changes. Policy 6160, just giving a report first. Policy 6160, we reviewed the policy for accepting grants from outside sources. Currently, we approve the application of grants to third parties. And that creates a bottleneck where there's a time delay. Where there's a time limit on applying for a grant from any of the community groups that support us regularly. It has to go through the chain from the teacher to the administrator to the superintendent to the board to approve the application. We decided that the board doesn't need to approve the application, the superintendent does. But when the grant is successful, we still would accept the receipt of the funds. It's an effort to streamline the application process because we don't know who's going to fund us. Teachers can make applications for all sorts of things. That doesn't mean the grant is funded. Next, we worked through some mandatory policy changes that came down from the state. The biggest one was the revision to the sexual harassment of students policy. Our policy, as it existed, was robust, but did not comply with what was a very statutory reporting process. So we elected to use the model policy from Strauss-Esme for that. It's one of those things that's because it's so technical, we didn't want to jeopardize the district by modifying the proposed language from Strauss-Esme. As similar things to new policies that are up for first reading tonight, employee vaccination requirements, that's mandatory from the state. We took the verbatim recommendations from the state and accepted it, along with emergency and virtual remote instruction program. We approved the submission of that plan twice this year to the state. Now we have a policy to implement the plan if it's ever needed again in the future. The policy committee also reviewed started to construct the 2022-2023 school calendar and went through all the parameters around that. We have 181 school days for students. Spring break usually falls around Easter. Passover happens to be close to Easter this year, so deciding whether we're going to start spring break before Easter or after Easter is always a point of contention. Nobody's ever fully happy. We have a number of snow days built into the calendar, professional development days, and then President's Day weekend and Christmas break as well. Lastly, we started the conversation of reviewing our homework policy, along with start and end times for the school day, block scheduling, and all of those are going to be ongoing discussions. The start and end times for the school are set by regulation. The district policy is intentionally vague to allow for some flexibility with that. Luckily, we're not constrained to specific stop and start times in the staff contracts. So if block scheduling were to be implemented, there is some flexibility there. We are limited to the number of hours the teachers can teach, but the stop and start times aren't locked in stone, which is good because we have a 4-year contract now. It would take a long time to work through changes. Common complaints about the homework policy is that the transition from hybrid to full-time instruction, kids need to reacclimate to the environment of traditional school times. So that's where a lot of complaints had come from. We're sympathetic to that and think much of that can be addressed through the district supervisors. It doesn't need to be a top-down regulation at this point, but we are going to continue to examine the homework policy. And then we had a robust discussion about the policy 2530, instructional resources. And this has been something we've been talking about since last spring. Working on creating a framework for approving textbooks, instructional resources, and anything really involved in the classroom in a way that can actually be implemented, enforced, and doesn't micromanage the classroom. The administration is on board with creating a framework that's workable and aligns with the board's goals there. Yeah, and that will take us at least 1 or 2 more meetings to finalize that because it's 3 policies that are interconnected. We want to do it right. We don't want to fix one policy and create a gray area between that and another policy where things can fall through the cracks. So if we're going to make changes, we're going to do it right. And unfortunately, that means it takes a little bit longer. And now that brings us on to policy action items. I ask the board to approve.
All right, before we go there, can I ask a few questions?
Sure.
Tara, move it closer.
Yeah, I think, don't we want to make the motion and then we have discussion?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yep.
There's definitely time for questions.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, no problem.
So first, I ask the board to affirm the superintendent's decision in HIB incident 22E01 and 22HS01 for the reasons set forth therein. Can I have a second? Thank you, Amy. Dana?
Zahara Aziz? Yes. Brendan Gallagher?
Yes.
Leila Morelli? Yes. Gretchen Oleg? Yes. Tara Porto?
Yes.
Sona Patel?
Yes.
Amy Root?
Yes.
All right. Now I ask the board to approve for second reading the following policies. 0164, conduct of board meetings. 0167, public participation in board meetings. Can I have a second? Thank you, Leila. Now you go.
That wasn't the one.
Oh, that wasn't? Oh. Okay.
Thank you, though.
Okay. Any questions on these policies? We did make a minor revision over the weekend, or last week. It was posted this weekend. It was an editorial clarification of what we meant by action items, or agenda items. We added the word action to signify that public comment during the first session is related to items we're voting on. The reason we made the change is because when looking at that policy, the model policy suggests we have one public comment session at the end of the meeting and cap it at 60 minutes. And that's not something Westfield has ever done. It wasn't something I was comfortable doing. We value public input on things that we're going to vote on before we vote on it. It makes no sense to talk about something after it's done. We truly do respect that, the longstanding tradition. We just want to clarify the difference between the first public comment session and the second public comment session.
I have one comment. And then I'll pass it to you.
Yeah.
Okay, just to clarify, part of that change as well will be a slight change in how the agenda is laid out. So you may have noticed that Brendan has done kind of a more fulsome recapping and a report from the committees that he has talked about. What we're going to be doing with the new policy moving forward is moving that to the beginning of the meeting. So anyone who's here will be able to hear those reports, and you'll hear in a nutshell the context for what we will then be voting on the agenda throughout the meeting. And that will help give greater context for those of you who have comments about agenda action items that you'd like us to hear before we do the voting. So that, if provided that we vote to approve for second reading these policies, that'll be a slight change in how you see things going forward. But again, we're looking to increase transparency and give you more information for when you come to these meetings or when you watch them at home later.
Yes, so just to expand on Amy's comment there, all the reports, so we'll open the meeting, Pledge of Allegiance, Superintendent's report, and announcements, and then all the committee chairs will give a report similar to what I did for facilities and policies. Then we'll open up to public comment about things we're going to vote on later in the meeting. Once public comment is over, then we'll go back and vote on items on the agenda in the order that they're listed. So we give you guys the information, you give comments to us, then we debate and vote, or decide, hold off because of public comment.
Brendan, can you also address why this was done out of turn? You said, I think it was every 5 to 6 years this is done, and this was most recently revised in 2019, is that correct?
Yes, let me pull up that. So there was a minor change in April of 2020, and it allowed for virtual meetings, and a typographical change in January of 2020, but it was last addressed in May of 2013. So it is in the cycle. We had to make emergency changes in April of 2020 to deal with the pandemic and allow us to vote on a budget virtually. But the prompting for the change this year, when Dr. Gonzalez joined the district, he commented that other districts that he had worked in had their meetings in a different order. And it wasn't necessarily that ours were wrong. We then started looking at what other districts do in the order that they carry out their business. And the version that we put up for the board agenda is really a combination of the best features of all of them. We want to streamline what we're doing, want to make it easier for people to follow along, and we want to make it easier for us to follow what's going on as well. We noticed that there were lots of comments about what a superintendent's report might say before it was even given, and that wasn't helpful. So we wanted to streamline the process for everybody involved.
So I agree with that reasoning. I think that's a good idea. I have one just note that I want to highlight, is because somebody had raised this, and I think it's a good point to raise, but I also just wanted to read it to make sure that it wasn't misinterpreted. In terms of the agenda, that the district operated electronic communication, each member of the board no later than 48 hours prior to each meeting of the board. So that's just a no later than. But I do agree that, you know, the earlier that the board members can get the agenda and whatever policies or documents that we're asked to read or review and perhaps even vote on, the better, within reason, obviously, because our superintendent is very busy. And I want to highlight that in conjunction with the board members' responsibilities of reading everything and being prepared for the meeting so that we do not end up unnecessarily delaying actions simply for lack of preparation, which is, in my opinion, is not in the interest of the school district, right, as a whole. So I think those two kind of come together, especially since we're all volunteers at the end of the day and most of us have full-time jobs.
Yeah.
So this is not something that we're voting on. I just wanted to highlight something about what you said, Brendan, in the policies meeting. So about the homework, because this has been such a big topic and the public has come and spoken about it, that it is partially, is it a transition from hybrid to full-time and a reacclimation? So Mrs. Fendes did send a survey out to the students today, and it will be coming to the parents and the teachers later, just to get a sense of what's happening. And is it something from post-pandemic, or is it a true issue that we need to work on? So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you. So back to Sahar's comment about 48 hours notice. Our practice has been that we send out the agenda on Fridays before a Tuesday meeting. But if there were a need for, say, a Friday meeting or a Thursday meeting, that 48 hours would mean that we'd send it out Tuesday. So we're not sending out agenda items on Sunday, which would be the 48 hours. Really, the practice is 96 hours. But if there was a specially scheduled meeting, the Tuesday would be compliant with that. And the only other change from the existing policy, if board members want to add things to the agenda or request that things be added to the agenda, it's got to come in by noon on Thursday. And that's simply because of a change that we made with Dr. Gonzalez, where Amy and I are currently meeting with him and Dana 2:30 on Thursdays to assemble the agenda. So if you get it to us before that meeting, then it can get on the agenda. Previously, we had met on Mondays or Tuesday mornings to go over the agenda once it was compiled. Now we're compiled by the administration. Now we compile it together. All right, if there are no other questions. Dana?
Sahar Aziz? Yes. Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Layla Morelli? Yes. Gretchen Oleg? Yes. Tara Porto? Yes. Sonal Patel?
Yes.
Amy Root?
Yes.
All right. Now it's the board to approve policy items number 3 and 4. Can I have a second? Thank you, Layla. Policy item number 3 is to approve for first reading 1648, school employee vaccination requirements, mandatory. 2425, emergency or virtual instruction programs, mandatory. 5751, sexual harassment of students. This is a complete repeal and replacement of the existing policy for the reasons I gave in my report.
Just to clarify, the vaccination policy, the policy is mandatory. The vaccinations are not mandatory.
Right.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Yes. Okay. I'm just reading off the notation on the agenda. Thank you for the clarification. 6160, grants from private sources. And then to approve the repealing of the following policies for first reading. 1648, Restart and Recovery. 1649, Federal Families First Coronavirus Response Act. 1650 remote learning. These were all emergency policies we implemented in 2020, and the executive orders under which they were operating have since been repealed. Any questions on these policies?
Yeah, so the vaccine, you're saying, Layla, is not mandatory, but then the people would be subjected to multiple tests a week, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
The governor's executive order
Right,
requires that employees be
right.
vaccinated or be subject to once a week testing.
So that was 253, Executive Order 253?
Yes.
So the rationale in that executive order was heavily due to, and it was said by Governor Murphy, that children 12 and under cannot be vaccinated, which has since changed. Was there any updated version of that? Because I've spoken to friends who are board members of other districts and they are not doing this at this time. So I just wanted to know why we are, when one of the lead rationale points was that, and that again is now off the table, which would make this moot, in my opinion.
Whether there are other options available for children, the governor's order still stands, and we're still required to implement a policy.
Yeah, it's a mandated policy, so I don't know why other boards aren't mandated. I don't know.
Whether they have a policy or not, they still have to comply with it. And the executive order requires us to implement a policy.
Okay. And then for the 6160, the grants, can you address what one of the members of the public said about us not following? Was that accurate? Does anyone have information about, was money spent prior to board approval from outside funds? And is it true that this policy addresses that and corrects it for future
I'll start with the last part. The only change.
I'm sorry. Can you explain the question again, Tara, just so that I can write it down?
One of the members of the public said through OPA requests that it looked like the district spent funds that were not board approved from an outside source, and that this policy is to address that situation so that moving forward, if that occurs, it wouldn't be violating policy. And I wanted to know if that was accurate and what the status would be. If it were accurate, what would we do about that? And then, is that what this is for?
So I'll start with the last part.
Okay.
The only change to this policy is whether the board approves the applications being submitted to third parties, not the receipt of the funds. That part of our existing policy and practice still stands. During finance, every time we read off, such and such donated $253 for whatever, that still applies. We'd still have to approve the receipt of those funds. And in that receipt, the reason for the donation.
So were we in violation of a policy, or we were not?
I don't believe we were. I'm going back and looking at minutes to make sure, but
Okay.
I don't have an answer for you at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the first readings or repeals? All right, Dana?
Sahar Aziz? Yes. Brenda Galligan?
Yes.
Leila Morelli?
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg? Yes. Tara Porto?
Abstain.
Sonal Patel?
Yes.
Amy Ruth?
Yes. Do you have your next policy meeting?
We do. It is, our next policy meeting is on November 30th.
Okay, all right.
November 30th.
November, okay. So we may hear about new things at our next meeting. Okay, all right. Okay, all right. Moving on to curriculum. I do not have the notes in front of me from our last meeting, but curriculum met remotely on October 21st. We discussed, as was highlighted earlier in Dr. Gonzalez's report, proposals for 3 new practical arts classes that could all fall under the subject of STEM classes. An introduction to architecture, architectural design 2, and computer-aided design. We also heard about the revision of elementary world languages from Dr. Pinkay, our world languages supervisor, and we heard about revision of the high school interdisciplinary course called American Studies. It was being revised in the course of a 5-year revision cycle. That course has actually stayed remarkably similar to what was approved in 2016. The 4 key topics continue to be the same as it was when it was approved in 2016. There's a slight reordering of the topics, but they were illusions, perceptions, conformity, and power. And the reading list is the same as it was in 2016. So it was helpful, I think, to be able to do the meeting via WebEx. Some of our board members were able to participate remotely from places of employment on break, which was helpful. So it looks like we'll be continuing that again at our next meeting. We also discussed for approval district field trips for the 2021-2022 school year. One looks like a repeat of a trip that we just approved, and it's because we did. Last time we approved for students from Edison to be able to take a STEM trip to see some sites in Florida and apply STEM principles there, and that was a sort of a makeup class from last year when they weren't able to do it. Tonight we're looking at approving that course for current students. And as usual, we're fortunate enough to have a couple of interns and student teacher candidates before us. Anyone who was at the meeting or any board members, anyone who's at the meeting have anything else to add from a report standpoint? Yep.
Not from a report standpoint, but I have some questions.
You do? Okay.
I don't know if now's the time to ask them, or do you want to pass the put us to motion first? I'm not sure.
Okay, let's just see. Does anybody else have anything to add from the meeting?
We did have a brief discussion, and it's somewhat related to the kindergarten issue, is, for example, with field trips, right, is that to the extent that there is a demand for more field trips or a need for more field trips, one of the limitations was funding, and again, just hitting that 2% operating or 2% raise in operating expenses, whereas our expenses are going up more than 3% a year. So that's just one more thing that's affected, is because, well, and Dr. Gonzalez, you can add to this. Obviously, you're the expert, but they're not cheap, right? So if we want more of those types of field trips that some of us, myself included, I think are very enriching, some of which may require leaving the district or some travel, just requires more money.
Right, but I think that the costs are offset, though, by fees that are charged to the participants on those field trips. So I think every school, principals have funds that are available in case, in case family finances are an issue and might preclude a student from being able to attend a field trip. But by and large, most of the field trips are self-funded by the participants. And for overnight field trips, that even includes costs of any nursing staff that need to accompany the group. For instance, like Model UN, when they do their trip away, nursing staff accompanies them, and that's covered by the cost of the participants as well. So you're right, costs continue to go up, and cost is always a factor, but yeah, when you hear about something that one school is doing, and you wonder if every school is doing the same or is offering that same opportunity, at least we know we're not playing favorites money-wise. The parents are largely offsetting the cost of those trips.
Although, because this is, I think we do have to at least be cognizant of making sure that all the schools have the opportunities to do that, right? Because I know this was an issue like sometimes at the elementary school level or maybe even at the middle school level where maybe one particular elementary school has a field trip, and it's good to know that these are primarily parent-funded. I didn't realize that. But maybe other elementary schools, their parents may want that opportunity for their kids. So again, just considering that, but just wanted to note that, to the extent that it's informative for parents that are here.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So I would like the board to consider curriculum items 1 through 3. Could I have a second? Thank you, Sonal. Okay. Layla, did you have something that you wanted to ask?
Sure. So, sorry. So I was at the curriculum meeting. I'm not sure if this was the meeting that I had to leave and then come back. It is very possible. So I don't know if the book that the parents are bringing up, if the Lewis Eye was discussed. It was not. I know that Dr. Pinero, I had asked Dr. Pinero, I knew this was a pre-approved course, it's an elective, and I had asked what the changes were because there are some things that may or may not be considered controversial in the coursework, and I know it's an already established course, and the explanation of the course was very informative and very interesting. And it sounds like it is a great elective. I've never heard of The Bluest Eye. I have a 10th grader. I'm sure I will be hearing about it. So I didn't know what the contents of the book are. I didn't certainly do any research on the book because this is a prior approved course, and perhaps that's my negligence. And I am uncomfortable with what I'm hearing. I do think I'm not for banning books. That's not what this is about. But I am uncomfortable with the idea that if we say that if the purpose of this is to analyze the causes and powerful effects of internalized racism on an individual and on a community, why we're talking about rape, why we're talking about molestation, child pedophilia, that is concerning to me. And I would have liked to ask those questions from the teachers at the meeting. So that's just what I wanted to put out there, and I apologize if this isn't the right way to do it, but it's concerning.
Why don't you make a motion?
Okay, how do I do that? I make a motion.
I think I know what you're trying to say. You'd like to make a motion to strike that line from the agenda, or what do you?
Yes, I second striking that.
I don't know what that means.
Let me pull it up here.
So I was suggesting, and I didn't mean to put words into your mouth, Layla,
okay.
but I was suggesting it sounded to me, like Tara, when you wanted some more time to look into something, that's what it sounds like to me that you were asking for. That you had some additional questions, you didn't have an opportunity to raise them at the curriculum committee. So I'm suggesting, and again, I don't want to tell you what your motion should be, but that perhaps that this curriculum gets tabled so that you're offered an opportunity to ask those questions and come back to the board at that point. So I'll let you make your motion. That's what I was suggesting.
Can I also just explain sort of the conduct and why we approve things with a first reading and a second reading? It's for just such a situation where either, I mean, ideally, we would know everything about every course we're talking about and every book that we're reading.
Right.
The fact of the matter is that we have time constraints, and we occasionally don't get to the details of every book that is discussed in a class or every particular aspect of the curriculum. And sometimes we have members of the public who bring things to our attention when we discuss them for first reading. And so that's why we have a second reading as well. So we can make a motion to table it, or we can also either vote to approve or not to approve, or to abstain from this portion of the vote, knowing that the curriculum committee is meeting on Thursday, and we will have an opportunity to ask those questions and get additional information. So that is also an opportunity, and that is part of why the sort of the kind of the form of our agenda is set up the way that it is that it allows for fact-finding and additional reporting prior to full approval of an item.
Okay, I understand the options, and thank you for, I appreciate the words. But my concern is that we have just come out of controversial issues and talking about choices of books and what are the best choices of books and what maybe is not the best choices of books. So I think, and again, I didn't know this was a book that could fall into that category, but I think that should have been pointed out, because I think that and I'm not saying that I don't think it's a great book, because we may speak to the teachers and they may tell us, that the reason why they choose this book and they use this book is for X, Y, Z, and that may be amazing, but I think we have to flag, if we want to follow the policies and protect the children as well as the district and staff, I think we have to be very clear. If we know that something is controversial, I think it needs to be flagged. Does that make sense?
Yes. So, okay. Yeah, so thank you, Layla, for saying that. So this book has recently been viral in school board meetings across the country with parents reading from the book. It's caused a ton of outrage. And I actually learned that the book was being used in the schools separately from this, and that a teacher actually said that the kids were so lucky they were going to get to be reading this book in one of the classes. And then, to my shock, I saw that it was on this document as well as an intentional book to be read. I'm really, there's no other words than just sad and shocked that any of our educators would think it's okay to give children this material. If they can't go onto an online porn site until they're 18, they should not be given this book. It could be damaging to them. The things that were read here were unbelievable, that we would give our children this to read. I don't understand how anyone could think that's okay. I actually have a statement from Mike Beelan who wanted me to read regarding this as well, so I'm going to do that now. Due to work-related travel, I am unable to attend the BOE meeting this evening. On the agenda for first reading approval is The Bluest Eye. I reviewed select contents of the book. I was going to quote a portion of the book on pages 162 and to 163 from a sexual predator's perspective of rape. However, it is not appropriate to further glorify the predator. The sexually explicit material, graphic descriptions, and the disturbing language used within the book. We don't need to hide topics from students, but these topics need to be presented in a more appropriate way. We need to have boundaries in what is taught in our classrooms and listen to perspectives of parents. If a student had started using these sexual descriptions and stories at a lunch table, would this be tolerated? I don't think so. He will have more to say at the next meeting, but he wanted me to share that with the group. I don't see any way that we could, as responsible parents, adults, and people, allow this book to be continued to be used. So that's where I stand.
Okay. Sahar? Okay.
She's
okay.
I was just saying in support of Layla, I agree with everything you said, Layla, and then I had a question, and that is, if there is a motion, can it be for just that particular part of the curriculum? It doesn't have to be for all of them. That was just a question about.
You mean that particular curriculum, like that document, rather
just
than
that one, like
than all the ones that are up for first reading?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if that's the motion, then we would separate
I'll
it.
make a motion that we table the vote on curriculum item. Well, no, that's not an accurate
Can I just comment before you make the motion?
Sure.
You can still make. I just want to understand something. I want to clarify. When we vote on this document, which is the American Studies, I'm trying to look at the title of it. Yeah, the course, or whatever course we're approving. My understanding is that we're not necessarily approving the books or materials that will be used. We're only approving essentially there's a bunch of text here which is publicly available, but you know, which parts of the New Jersey educational laws and regs are being met for each course. And so I guess what I'm trying to understand is this a separate issue in terms of what materials are used versus just the course? Because the reason I'm asking that is because I would hate for the course to be delayed just because of a particular book, and instead talk about the book, but in the context of whatever our jurisdiction is for approving books, which I don't even know if we have that jurisdiction, because there's got to be some deference to teachers' expertise.
That's correct, and that's exactly what I'm saying. And this is an elective, so it's not even. I'm absolutely saying what you're saying. It's the potential case studies, so I don't even know if this book will be used, but it's listed, and that's the book itself. I think we need to discuss a little bit more, not the course.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
That wasn't clear.
But that, from my perspective, I don't know anybody else, but from my perspective, I'm talking about this specific.
It's an existing course, so I mean, it's not like the course is going to be put on hold by virtue of us tabling the reading so that board members can get some further answers.
Okay.
Well, and the approval of the book happens when we purchase books, not the continued use of them. So that secondary mechanism isn't applicable right now.
Okay. And if in fact, just to clarify too about this being an elective, this is a course for juniors in the high school. and it meets for 2 periods together currently because it is a blending of English and language arts class for juniors and history from that same time period. So it sort of weaves them together, which is why if anyone has been able to look at the curriculum document, you see that in discussing 1920s American history and the golden age or whatever you want to call it that preceded the Great Depression, there's a discussion of the Great Gatsby. There's a discussion of using the Grapes of Wrath, in part because they are great American works of literature, but also because they depict a certain time period and they depict themes that that are prevalent from that time period. So again, this is an elective course. Not everyone chooses to do this. This marrying of English classes and history classes has been going on for a number of years at Westfield High School. It's offered at different levels. It's not offered sophomore year because American history and British literature, which is what's commonly taught sophomore year, don't really lend themselves to sort of that melding together. But this is, that aspect of the course. And you're right, we didn't get an opportunity to ask the teachers if difficult sources have been used before, how do they handle that in the classroom? But this is the kind of thing, whether it's this book or another book, it's something that, although we may be trying to wrap our arms around it because here we are as volunteers attempting to do that and represent the community, the teachers are well versed in how to do this. But you're right, we don't have full knowledge of how that happens.
Given where we've been this year, I don't want to be too overly legalistic about this, right? I mean, I think that I don't think anyone here is questioning our educators. I think that there's legitimate concern among a number of board members, and that tabling the reading of this particular curriculum until the next meeting to allow answers, to those questions. Nobody's trying to tell anybody how to teach the book. I mean, I think so. My motion is that we table the reading of the American Studies course, but I'm not looking to amend the rest of Amy's motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Dana.
Ready for a vote? Sahar Aziz? No. Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Layla Morelli?
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg?
Yes.
Tara Porto? Yes. Sonal Patel?
Yes.
Amy Root?
No. Okay. So we'll table that portion of the motion. And I would ask the board then to consider the rest of curriculum item number 1, which is approving for first reading world languages, elementary world languages, and then the revised elementary world languages, and then the new course proposals for Introduction to Architecture, Architectural Design 2, and the Computer Aided Design. And then curriculum item 2 is the district field trips. Curriculum item number 3, approving the interns and student teacher candidates. Any amendments to those? No? Second from Sonal? Okay. Dana, we'll vote on those, please.
Sahar Aziz?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Layla Morelli?
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg?
Yes.
Tara Porto? Yes. Sonal Patel?
Yes.
Amy Root?
Yes. Okay. And as I said, curriculum has its SIP, Curriculum Instruction and Programs, has our next committee meeting on Thursday morning, also via WebEx. So we'll be able to participate. Hope you all can make it from the committee, and we'll have more to say at our next meeting and some additional information to share with the public as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So moving on to finance, I will attempt to fill the shoes of Rob Garrison, which is difficult to do. We're missing him this evening as well as Mike. Let's see. I would like the board to consider finance items number 1 through 27. May I have a second?
Amy, there was just revised wording on number 1 and 2.
I'm sorry? Oh, yes, right.
So these were change order, this is a change order to add additional doors for the elementary door project, but the resolution says architectural services is not for architectural services, it's actually for the doors themselves. So number 1 and 2 just remove the for architectural services.
But there, okay. And now that that's been clarified, Brendan is seconding? Okay. All right, I would just like to, there's a lot of items here. We've talked about sort of the nature and form of accepting some of these things and putting them up for board approval. So I would just like to call out item number 11 is a motion to accept a grant of $300 from the Rotary Club of Westfield for their Phil Hauer Award recipient, Nancy Rigel. Nancy is a Franklin Elementary School Achieve teacher and will use the funds to purchase items for her classroom. Number 12 is to accept a donation of $1,757.99 from the Westfield Coalition for the Arts to purchase the following items. $577 to purchase portable speakers for the Wilson Elementary School Music Department, another $577 to purchase portable speakers for the Jefferson Elementary School Music Department, $603.99 to purchase new music folders for the Westfield High School orchestra students. Also, item 13, accept a donation of $3,240.90 from the Westfield Choral Parents Association to purchase wireless microphones for the Westfield High School chorus students. Number 14, accept a donation of $5,000 from the Westfield High School PTSO for partial funding of the piano project. This project is for the restoration of Westfield High School's piano. And then we have additionally 5 other submissions for grants from the Westfield Coalition for the Arts. They are enumerated in the agenda, and if those funds are approved, we'll be receiving those funds at a future date. So I'm not going to read them in great detail at this point, but they are many and varied, and I'm learning more about the arts just from reading about the items being requested. And I would think that's it. Does anyone have any questions or comments about finance items? Yes.
I have a clarification question. Can, just for my edification, and I think maybe some residents in the audience, can someone explain the American Rescue Plan? Because it appears we're getting some funds, which sounds like they're helpful funds for summer learning and enrichment and beyond the school day, which presumably address learning loss related issues. I don't know if that's specifically that, but what is the ARP?
Do you want to?
I'm not sure I understand which number are you asking about?
Number
6?
Number 3.
Number 3.
Number 3 is funds that the federal government is passing through the state to local school districts as from the pandemic, and that particular grant, the ARP IDEA, is targeted for special needs students.
Okay. And then number 6 is similarly?
So number 6 is the newest round of funding that this federal government is giving to us, and that grant is actually due next week. So that hasn't been finalized yet as to what that's going to be used for. But what's laid out there are the requirements by the state. So in other words, where they have mental health support staffing of $45,000, of the $1.6 million, $45,000 must be spent on mental health. So the details of that haven't been finalized yet, but we need board approval to submit the grant, which is due next week.
Well, I'll just add my praise for the staff for potentially getting us $2 million. So that's good news.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And I'd just like to thank the Westfield Coalition for the Arts for their continued support. And I mean, they're giving us a lot of money, or potentially giving us a lot of money, and they do so regularly, and we continue to thank them.
Yes, excellent point there as well. We had our finance meeting was last Friday, and we did discuss some of these items at that meeting, but also discussed very preliminary budget talks. So we'll be hearing a lot more from Dana about that during the next few meetings. So as we look at being able to do any additional programming, or even to kind of maintain the level of programming that we currently have, it's a very challenging time. So being able to receive additional funds is helpful, but there are extremely specific rules about how those funds can be utilized and what they can be applied to. So Dana and her office over on Elm Street we're fortunate to have them, but they are extremely busy. So we are indeed very thankful. And I think the next finance meeting is December 10th, I believe.
Sounds right.
So, okay. Any other comments or questions on finance items? No. Okay, we need a roll call, right, Dana?
Correct.
Okay.
Sahar Aziz?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Layla Morelli?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Tara Porto?
Yes.
Sona Patel?
Yes.
Amy Root?
Yes. Okay, all right, moving on to technology. Gretchen? No report. No report, well, that makes that quick, okay. All right, I would like the board to consider notes for the record. And do we have any unfinished business that anyone would like to address? No? Okay. Any new business? No? Okay. Liaison reports? Okay. Can we start with Sonal? There we go. Okay. If you can reach it.
Yeah, I met with the Washington School PTO and Dr. Perry, and we had a really informative conversation. Dr. Perry gave us some information about their Start Strong and how the school was doing overall. As a whole, the parents and the community have questions and concerns about full-day kindergarten, since that has been, or the site Washington School has been mentioned prior to COVID. It was a possible site for construction. So that came up, and then they were interested in some resources that might be available, so I pointed them to the board website for SEL and social and emotional health and wellness. And lastly, they are planning a multicultural event for the spring. So they have a lot of good things underway.
Last week I attended the executive committee of the New Jersey Interscholastic Sports Association. The biggest change from that group is the elimination of the Tournament of Champions for various sports. Some sports like football and at the sectional championship level, where there are in effect 23 state champions for various sports. And those are geographic and based on the size of the schools. Other sports, field hockey being one of them, the one that came to mind. The sectional championships will play down to a group champion, and then those groups play each other, where you could have a school like Westfield, which is in the largest category, playing a tiny school, Springfield being the closest Group 1 example, to the point where the games weren't competitive. The winners were almost preordained. You could look at the schedule and figure out who was going to win. So with the realignment of the sports calendars at the end of last school year, they're eliminating those tournaments to allow for greater regular season play. Some sports had 8 games and then started playoffs. Other sports play 12, 14, 16 weeks without tying up half of their season in single elimination tournaments. So that was the biggest change out of that group. And with the New Jersey School Boards Association, I have a letter here from Dr. Feinsod addressing the National School Boards Association letter that was made public and generated a fair amount of controversy. He starts out with some background information on the letter, and it says, the letter from the National School Boards Association was sent without the input or approval of the New Jersey School Boards Association. We did not even receive advance notice that it was going out. The NJSBA does not endorse this letter, nor does it reflect the beliefs and policies of the NJSBA. The NJSBA strongly supports the ability of parents and citizens to voice their opinions at board meetings, which is the fundamental principle of our democracy. Community input and local control of boards is at the heart of what the NJSBA has advocated for since its founding in 1914. One of the bedrock beliefs of our association is that parent-school district partnership is critically important, and that parents are the ultimate advocates for their children's education. For those unfamiliar with the structure of the National School Boards Association, it's an organization of state school boards associations. However, the group has no control or oversight of the NJSBA and is not a parent organization of the NJSBA, nor does it directly represent local boards of education, which are not their members. The NJSBA has expressed its disapproval of the NSBA's statement and will work to ensure the national organization adheres to the primary mission of enabling national local boards of education to advance the education, health, and safety of the nation's public school students. And it goes on from there. But there was some concern that we were endorsing the NSBA letter. As a board of directors member, I was shocked to hear that allegation, and I'm grateful that our executive director has clarified. And we firmly disavow the previous letter, which has since been rescinded. But yeah.
Did you have anything else to add, liaison report-wise?
I did go to Jefferson twice. Oh, sorry. I did attend twice Jefferson's meeting, the PTO meeting, and the general one and the executive one. I don't have anything really to report, though. They were more interested in hearing what was going on here. They had a lot of questions about full-day kindergarten.
Okay.
Just one library comment. You may have seen in the news that the Westfield Memorial Library has officially gone fine-free, which is very exciting for our community. So there will be no more overdue fines. That doesn't mean people are completely off the hook if they don't return an item. I believe it's 35 days. You can go onto the FAQs. They will still be responsible. It will be considered lost for the cost of the item. However, there will be no more late fees.
Gotcha. Okay. So if anybody's been holding a book at home because they were embarrassed to bring it,
yes,
they should feel free to return that book.
Yes, right. Well, I don't know if it was taken out before the date, if they'd still owe the money or not. I'll have to get back to you on that.
And
but still, please return the books.
Right. Please return the books.
Still, please return the books. Yes. Okay. All right. And I would like to add that I was able to attend the high school PTSO meeting last week. Unfortunately, it was very brief, but I was able to, again, kind of report on what's happening here for them. And then I was able to sort of piggyback in a way by attending the girls soccer sectional championship game on Friday afternoon and hear a little bit from Principal Esfendis and from the athletic director, Sandy Maymery, about the homecoming dance, which was held on Friday night. Unfortunately, they had to limit the number of students who attended, so I think it was seniors only this year, but it sounded like kids were excited, and that's wonderful to see that we're able to offer, more of a normal school year activities, and girls soccer is playing again tomorrow. It's not quite Tournament of Champions, but they are playing Ridgewood tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. You have to buy your tickets in advance, but yeah, I'm hoping to do that, and I hope they do well. And then I'll be meeting with the Franklin Executive PTO board this coming Friday. So I'll have more to say at that point, at our next meeting. Okay. That's it for liaison reports, correct? Okay. All right. This is our second public comment meeting then, public comment portion of our meeting coming up. During this portion of the meeting, members of the public are invited to address the Board of Education on any topic, so it doesn't need to be an agenda item that we're taking action on. That poor woman who was here before, if she's still here, I hope she gets a chance to speak. Again, please state your name and address for the record. Direct all remarks to me as board president, not to individual board members or staff. And the rest of the rules from before apply. I think we could probably, do you want me to read them again? Okay. All right. I think I see some familiar faces. So I think people know the rules. So please be mindful of the speaker. And each speaker's statement will be limited to 3 minutes in duration. Brendan's going to keep time for us here. And please go ahead and just give us your name and address, please.
Robert Shire, 17 Doris Parkway, Ray Edison Fields Project. I'm not going to rehash in detail all the negatives that the Edison Fields project will generate. Rather, my question for tonight is this: why adopt such a radical and, for all intents and purposes, permanent approach to the problem of field capacity with all those negatives, when a more rational approach without the negatives hasn't even been attempted? The supporters of the Edison plan have made two arguments. First, that additional field capacity in town is needed. Second, that the necessary capacity can't be achieved with natural grass fields and without stadium lighting of those fields in residential areas. The validity of the first argument as to need has been conceded, but the plan supporters' follow-up article is based upon nothing but pure speculation. First of all, We don't know what amount of additional capacity is necessary because no study of need, specifically in Westfield, has been undertaken. Second, and similarly, no attempt to achieve significant additional capacity with natural grass fields has ever been undertaken. New grass playing fields on existing properties around town can be developed. Existing grass fields around town improved, and both maintained at a high level under the supervision of a professional turf manager. And as was convincingly demonstrated by Mr. Zanelli at the last town council meeting, the long-term cost of such a green regimen will be far less than the cost of environmentally unfriendly plastic grass, crumb rubber fields with stadium lighting. In addition to reducing costs, fields of natural grass will avoid the problems, which haven't been denied by supporters of the project, of higher injury rates and potential health risks occasioned by carcinogenic materials. It's important for you to know that the DEP has been studying the health effects of plastic grass and chrome rubber, has cited several potential health hazards, but has yet to determine that exposure to those substances is safe. Natural grass fields without stadium lighting will also avoid the safety and other quality of life issues arising out of heavy nighttime traffic and parking.
Thank you.
And loud noise in residential neighborhoods.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your comments.
Thanks for your patience. Love this process. It's actually great now that I know all about it. So I've got a third and a first grader at Tamaulipas. Spent this fall at the soccer fields.
Sorry, it was Mrs. Skirdal? Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Erin Skirdal.
And
I don't
the
want to
address?
feel.
Sorry.
16 Normandy.
Thank you.
Thank you. So anyway, while I was milling about on the sidelines with these parents, I got into the habit of asking them what they thought about the Edison project. I do a lot of consumer research for my day job, and so without leading the witness, I simply asked them what their opinion was. And so what I heard from each of the parents that I spoke to was that they weren't comfortable with artificial turf next to their child's school. So many parents expressed their concern that I decided to launch a petition on change.org to understand how many parents like myself would prefer those fields behind Edison to be upgraded to natural grass turf fields instead of artificial turf fields. So that petition launched 48 hours ago, so just 2 days ago, and it already has over 370 signatures, 25 since I've been sitting here, and is growing by the hour. Princeton Township recently conducted an analysis of grass versus synthetic fields, and they decided to install grass. Westfield has not done a comprehensive analysis of grass versus artificial turf because capacity has been the only factor really considered to date. I think our children deserve a more holistic approach. And I'm here representing the hundreds of parents who have already signed that petition. So we ask you to, number one, update the Edison Field project to install only grass turf instead of artificial turf. Number two, ensure equitable access to grass fields for all Westfield students, including those who will attend Edison Middle School and already attend Edison Middle School. Number three, preserve and improve grass fields adjacent to Westfield schools. And we believe that we can increase field capacity while also ensuring that our school buildings are surrounded by grass for the enjoyment of our children. And watching this process, I feel really hopeful that you guys will go back and have a thoughtful conversation and really discuss with the Rec Commission to have a more holistic approach to the way that we treat our fields. So I appreciate all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't start that just yet. Let me pull it up. Okay.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Ken Warren. I live at 5 Doris Parkway. I'm here to speak about the proposed Edison Sports Complex. Edison Intermediate is already on an incredibly dense area. I've seen many accidents every year within this quarter mile, where the town already has the Armory, the high school, Keller Field, Lincoln School, next to a small children's park, Edison Intermediate, Tamaqua School, Tamaqua Park, Houlihan, and Sid Fay. Putting a sports complex in the back of Edison is just asking for a bad accident waiting to happen. Traffic along these neighborhoods, these neighboring streets until 10:15 at night, and not all from in town. There's a proposal to, I'm sure, to outsource it to other towns as well. On weeknights and from early mornings on to late night on weekends will increase the number of accidents and possibly result in more than just a couple of scrapes and cuts. Who's going to be responsible for this? Who's liable? I would think that the town would have to assume some responsibility, having created this even more densely populated, high-traffic situation. We all just want what's best for our children. Please keep that in mind. A better solution would be to spread the fields out, refurbish the space we already have, not just Edison, Elm, Tamaqua, and Memorial, all on the very dense side of town, the south side, but also put some fields on the north side, which will put less stress on these targeted sites and give better access to all children on that side of town as well. You remember when we used to ride our bikes to fields? Let's give our kids the opportunity to do that. Wouldn't that just be terrific? This would create a safer solution than the current proposal of cramming all these fields onto just one side of town. Please keep in mind that this proposed complex with turf and lights is a solution that only satisfies a special interest, which isn't even town-affiliated, club sports. Why should the children in this area who attend Edison and live in the area have to suffer and the burden of this overcrowding, just for a minority group club sports? If the sports complex were to go forward in its current form, putting turf down where children are already currently playing would result in every school children either playing possibly on hot turf or unhealthy turf, or playing encaged inside the baseball fence field like zoo animals. That's something I don't think any of us can agree on as being good for either any of our children. Please consider the long term. These fields are going to be here after our kids graduate. You know, these fields are, and this situation, this dangerous situation will still be there. What do I got, 13 seconds? You have the power, board. Please do the right thing for our kids. Don't vote on a dangerous situation. Create the right, equitable, safe solution. I'm finishing up. This can't be about politics, not with our children's safety involved. Thank you for your time and consideration. Good night.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Terry Brennan. I live at 862 Rahway Avenue. I'm here to talk about the Edison Fields proposal. On the surface, you know, it's reasonable to think that, you know, new athletic fields are a good idea. But when one looks at this closely, one realizes that this proposal is a terrible idea financially. It's a bad idea from a traffic, safety, environmental, stormwater, parking, and noise standpoint, just to name a few. Plus, it doesn't even really solve the field shortage problem in its entirety. From a BOE standpoint, although it might be reasonable to play sports on artificial turf twice a week as a choice, I'm not okay with my kids having no choice but to spend 5 days a week exposed to this toxic turf, as they will be Edison students in a few years. I don't like the inequity of Roosevelt students having natural grass and Edison students not. And even though athletics are definitely a beneficial thing to support, I do not like the Board of Education getting involved in ceding its resources to private interests, namely the private sports leagues, who will primarily be the beneficiaries of the extra time that Turf and Lights affords. And especially during a time where we don't have enough physical resources to support full-day kindergarten, for example, I don't like the idea of the board giving up their physical resources for 30 years when they might otherwise be used for educational purposes sometime within those 30 years. Thank you very much.
Hi, Steve Kircher, 791 Nola Terrace. When does 2 + 2 not equal 4? When the mayor and town council speak about the Edison Fields project. I asked the school board to not expand the LOI currently in place and not approve leasing BOE property to the town of Westfield. When does 2 + 2 not equal 4? When the mayor and town council claim Westfield wants this, we need this. Well, they scientifically polled the citizens of Westfield. New soccer fields were a mid-level, medium priority. Other fields for lacrosse, softball, were a low priority. Why then are we way down this road at breakneck speed? Because this doesn't add up. Think about it. When does 2 + 2 not equal 4? When the mayor and town council claim they want to build fields, when in fact what they're doing is dumping 40,000 shredded tires on BOE property for each field that they propose to construct, so that the student population of Edison and more schools to come can enjoy the wonderful experience of playing on shredded used tires. Please stand up for your students and stop this project. When does 2 + 2 not equal 4? When the mayor and town council when the mayor stated at the town council meeting, I will not do anything to increase the danger on Rahway Avenue. Anytime I hear an absolute, red flags go up. Well, if that were true, she would stop the project. Is she going to stop the project? Nope. Has she? Nope. I want this Board of Education and the incoming board to play a leadership role, stand up for the students of EIS and their neighbors. When does 2 + 2 not equal 4? When the mayor and town council claim this is about field capacity. Well, there are 4 BOE fields today, unused by the Westfield Soccer Association, the largest population of student athletes. They don't use it because of the low quality of the fields, and they're concerned about potential injury to their players, which I fully understand and agree with. If this were about field capacity, the town would rebuild and properly maintain those fields at an approximate cost of $1.6 million, not $9 million, and add capacity in short order. My 8th grade history teacher, Mr. Dixon at Del Dios Middle School in Escondido, California, had at the front of his class 5 huge black letters that spelled think. I remember it today. I ask you to think, when does 2 + 2 not equal 4? I think I helped you find the answer.
Hello, my name is Judy Lynch. I don't live in Westfield, but I work in Westfield. I am the president of the Westfield Association of Educational Secretaries, also known as WAYS. On behalf of our members, I would like the Westfield community to know that the secretaries have been working without a contract since July 1st of this year. We look forward to achieving an expeditious, fair, and equitable settlement with the board and its negotiators. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good evening, Jen Andretta, 722 Warren Street. I want to thank the board and many of the members who said, hold on, maybe what I just heard from the bluest eye, hold on. I thought that before the agenda even went out for tonight, because this book is currently being read. It's already being read. So I'm grateful that it's been tabled. But children are reading it right now in a mandatory English class as a senior. So this is about more than the curriculum that's being proposed. This is about
as I said the very first time I stood up at this pulpit, which is, by the way, really, really nerve-provoking. It's very nervous. So I'm trying to keep my cool here, but it's about accountability. We parents, our kids are being read about a man raping his 11-year-old daughter and enjoying it. Who's accountable for the fact that that's already happening? I'm not talking future, I'm talking present. So please, all I'm asking is look deeper than just this curriculum with this book. Look and see how it's currently being used. Because parents whose children are reading this have reached out to teachers and principals. They're trying to work, and I thank God, it's not my child yet. Because apparently it's already being read. So please look deeper, just look deeper. Because we parents, I don't know what else we can do.
My name is Timothy Eaton. I live at 762 Knollwood Terrace. I want to talk about the Edison Field project. My wife and I have lived on Knollwood Terrace in Westfield for 34 years. Knollwood Terrace and the surrounding neighborhood is a great place to live, providing a quiet, peaceful, safe, and beautiful environment. That is why we moved here. The Edison Field project will change all of this. We and our neighbors are very concerned about the changes proposed, which will impact our safety, health, environment, and quality of life. 4 items to talk about. The 250,000 square foot artificial turf will generate safety and environmental concerns. Natural grass fields are safer and preserve the green environment. The increased noise levels coupled with towering lights at night will compromise indoor and outdoor family activities, impact our quality of life and mental health. Number 3, increased water levels and flooding will result from the runoff into the creek adjacent to the Edison Field. Chemicals from the field will pollute the drinking water. Wildlife will be negatively impacted. Parking and traffic will increase on Knollwood Terrace and other streets. There is a lack of adequate parking on school grounds currently. At the bend on Knollwood Terrace, there is an asphalt path providing access to the Edison Field. This will lead to more traffic and turn Knollwood Terrace into a 200-yard parking lot. There will be less room for walks, bike rides, and other activities. Safety will be compromised. For these reasons and others, we are asking you to consider alternatives to the proposed Edison Field project plan. Spreading the increased field capacity needed equitably over multiple locations throughout the town is the right thing to do, using grass fields and no tower lights. Other than family, our home and neighborhood are our most important assets. Please do not take away this great neighborhood of ours with this Edison Field project. The impact on health, safety, environment, and quality of life is very concerning. It saddens me. It should not happen in this great town of Westfield. Using multiple locations with grass fields and no lights is the right answer. Please be an advocate for our neighborhoods as we look for more field capacity. There are solutions which can increase field capacity and preserve our neighborhoods. They do not have to be mutually exclusive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi again. Camille Pripp, 1113 Columbus Avenue. I just want to say I feel really, it's again about the bluest eye. I feel really passionately about this because my son is forced to read this right now. He has no choice in his English 4 class. But I just wanted to finish up saying, just to let you know about a few more points about the bluest eye. The use of the book as assigned reading in high school would be like opening up Pandora's box because of all the possible ramifications involved. This can be looked at from so many different angles. The teacher who assigned the book in her class says there are protocols in identifying those individuals that may be triggered. But what are these protocols? If there is someone in the class who has been raped and has kept it hidden, or is even currently dealing with some type of molestation, would she feel comfortable saying anything at all to that teacher about her victimization? How would that student feel reading about the pleasure of pedophile feels when raping a child? What about this other case scenario? What if there happens to be someone in the class with these deviant urges, let's say, and that they suppress, but then they think, hey, the character in the book is acting on his sexual desires and liking it, so maybe it's not so bad if I do too. Just to sum up, reading this can be so confusing to teenagers. I don't know if Toni Morrison's book conveys an overall positive message, but I think you would have to be an adult to be able to fully comprehend it, and the possibility for psychological damage far outweighs any literary merit, given how much of a disturbing read some passages are, even to me as an adult. I don't think it should be introduced at a time in children's lives when their brains also are still developing and they aren't able to properly process the heavy subject matter. I realize Toni Morrison is a respected author, and I see that this book was published in 1970. I do doubt Toni Morrison intended her target audience to be minors. I don't believe in book banning. I think this book is fine as elective reading for adults at the college level. The proper place for this book is just not in the high school. I've spoken to an English teacher who has close to 30 years of experience teaching English at a nearby high school. She told me that they do not use this book, and they recently did a curriculum revision to add racism and its legacy as a unit. She believes, as I do, that there are so many other less controversial options that are not potentially harmful. She named a TED Talk titled The Danger of a Single Story, which I watched and thought was excellent as an option for high schoolers to watch. She also named Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup, Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, and The Invention of Wings by Sue Monk Kidd. If you're looking for a book specifically written by Toni Morrison, she recommends Song of Solomon as less controversial. My point here is that there are just so many other excellent options for high schoolers. The Bluest Eye is on the approved list of books for 11th graders. I'm asking for it to be removed from that list. I don't know if the Board of Ed is responsible for approving books at each grade. If need be, I will submit a formal complaint. It's just not appropriate. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Jan Onishi. I live at 759 Knollwood Terrace. Last month, I provided you with a handout describing the results of a toxicology study related to artificial turf. It showed the potential health dangers of water extracts prepared from the chrome rubber, which is the infill of the artificial turf. The study used an animal model. Animal models are routinely used in the chemical and pharmaceutical industries to study disease and health when research cannot ethically be conducted in humans. The chrome rubber was studied by mixing the chrome rubber with water. This is called a chemical extract. The animal model used in the study was a chicken embryo developmental model. The embryos were exposed to the extract from the rubber and monitored over time. Growth and general morphology were measured, brain morphology was measured, blood vessel growth and heart rates were measured. The extract, which was prepared from the rubber, caused toxicological responses in brain development and the cardiovascular system. I ask, what happens when a child is playing on the artificial turf field? The chrome rubber's infill base is disturbed simply by running across the surface or falling on it. The chrome rubber is aerosolized. Exposure to the chrome rubber can occur by inhalation or by swallowing. Why is this important? It's because up to 60% of the human body is composed of water. The ZOO study certainly showed that water can be used to extract chemicals from chrome rubber. The question is, can water on the surface of the lung tissue or the intestinal tissue extract these chemicals? Are the chemicals absorbed? Clearly, further research using relevant exposure models is warranted. You have a choice to make. Are these products safe for the children playing on them, falling on them, near the schools? The research is incomplete, but there is certainly red flags saying caution based on the ZOO study. Children from the ages of pre-K through high school will be playing on these fields. Will exposure to chrome rubber harm them in their later years? Is it worth the risk to expose our children to chrome rubber's infill during early developmental years when we know the results of the ZOO study? This is a question you should consider as you decide the fate of the Board of Education property. Natural grass or artificial turf fields on schoolyards. It's your choice. Think about it, and remember the ZOO study. Thank you very much.
My name is Jerome Fader. I live at 789 Knollwood Terrace. It's property just behind the schoolyard. Been a resident for 44 years. I want to talk about the Edison project and some of the specific aspects of the September 20th revised plan. This material came out of a project to look at lights, and it was claimed that the new LED lights were much better and that could alleviate any of the impacts of lighting. So I went around to other fields with measuring equipment. I looked at Sid Fay in Rahway, Oak Ridge Park in Clark, Scotch Plains High School. I guess particularly the last two were spread out, deluxe modern fields with lots of space, much nicer than anything we have. Principal findings. All the fields were much further from residences. All had a lot more land and all had a lot lower impacts on neighboring residences. Where there were houses at all, they were typically few and 70 to 100 feet or more feet away, as opposed to 15 feet, which we see in some instances of Edison fields. The light measurements showed light levels that were 10 times higher than Westfield allows. The new LED lights won't alleviate the impacts and would be way out of place. The proposed Westfield fields are crammed, squeezed, and built right up to the property line. In Scotch Plains, by contrast, I got to see an active school girls soccer team with excited girls screaming at the top of their lungs. They were loud. Can we put this within 15 feet of somebody's bedroom window at night? Westfield rules require a 40-foot buffer between the athletic fields and properties, but that's not pleasant in any of the revised Westfield plans. The Westfield plan also puts a stadium light 15 feet from the bedroom window of an autistic child. All the other fields, moving on to another topic, all the other fields were surrounded by fencing and restrictive signs to discourage non-sports users from traversing them. If Westfield leaves the fields unrestrictedly open, it would be the only such field. If we try to add fencing, then the revised plan shows the field intersecting the path from the rear schoolyard entrance from Knollwood Terrace to the school entrance. School children would need to either cross the middle of the field, which wouldn't be possible if there was fencing, or have to walk around it, which would add a couple extra blocks to the school's commute in all weather. And I guess this is the field entrances at the bottom, school entrances here, and the kids would either have to walk across the field or around it. Any fencing that we put on the field, I think I'm just about done. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. Lisa D'Onofrio, 1000 Seward Ave. With the recent expansion of the emergency use authorization of the COVID-19 vaccine for children ages 5 to 11, I see a ton of information about how safe and effective this vaccine is, but I see little to no information on the potential harm, side effects, and long-term research. As the looming vaccine mandates for both our teachers and our children hang over our heads, I encourage everyone to do their own research, not just listen to what you're being told or what is in the mainstream narrative. Let's review some COVID-19 vax facts that you aren't hearing about and should give you pause when considering mandates and vaccine clinics in our schools. The COVID-19 vaccines being used in the U.S. are not FDA approved. They are still under emergency use authorization. The COVID-19 vaccine does not stop infection. It does not stop transmission. The viral load is the same for both the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. Children ages 0 to 19 have a survival rate of 99.997, and they are 50 times more likely to die from the vaccine than the virus. The CDC, Cleveland Clinic, and a recent study from Israel all indicate natural immunity is far better than any vaccine. There is an increased risk of myocarditis in young adults, particularly in young boys. The CDC and FDA study in June 2021 reported that 90% of myocarditis cases required hospitalization. It is not normal for young, healthy children and athletes to have damage to their hearts. A Japan study shows the spike protein in the lipid nanoparticles do not stay in the shoulder muscle as originally thought. They travel throughout the body into the brain, heart, kidneys, and reproductive organs. No research has been conducted on pregnant women and the long-term effects on the mother or the babies. The countries with the highest vaccination rates have the highest infection rates. Singapore, Israel, Ireland, the UK. 78% of deaths in the UK were among the vaccinated. The CDC this month acknowledged that they don't have proof of a single known case where an unvaccinated person got COVID, recovered, and then infected again, which is not the case with the vaccinated. There is no protection or recourse you have as an individual or a parent of a child if injured from a COVID vaccine. Sadly, this was most recently displayed when Senator Ron Johnson held a panel this month in DC of both scientists and those gravely injured by the COVID vaccines. Representatives from Pfizer, Moderna, CDC, FDA, members of Congress were all invited. None showed. The U.S. champion mountain biker was among those who testified. He's now permanently injured from the vaccine and will never compete again. He asked, "How will we ever hear if we cover our ears? How will we ever see if we close our eyes? How will we learn if we are not present?"
Thank you.
Let me leave you with this. If there is a risk, there must be choice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kyle George, 605 Short Hills Court. Your justification for altering policy 6160 is that there's a delay on accepting grants. There should be a time delay on grants. The new policy says you vote on it after taking the money. You, as the BOE, have to provide the check and balance on the checks that you receive. When you went to the WEF in 2020, both you and they had an agenda. It's important to vote on this funding before you receive it. I believe you were in violation of 6160 as it currently stands. I've seen invoices from August. I'm not surprised the BOE didn't know about it because all the people on the emails were the usual suspects in the administration. The bluest eye is on the textbook list. Yeah, not reading what you vote on has consequences. But thank you for tabling it. But it's not just about the one book that other parents have read excerpts from, very disturbing excerpts. And in particular, I don't think it's an elective, at least it's not written like an elective, and it does look like a new course. Perhaps it is, but it's not clear in the syllabus. But even if it is an elective, you can't always use an elective as an everything goes escape clause. But take its introductory mini-unit on the American Dream, billed as a preview to the unit on illusions as an example. The unit asks about, quote, which individuals hold enough power to access the American Dream, end quote, and, quote, to what extent is the American Dream an illusion? This approaches from the presupposition that the American Dream is not accessible to all today. There's no mention or connection about how the civil rights movement of the 60s was in part a successful pursuit of equal access to the American Dream and thus a pursuit of the American Dream itself. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote in his 1963 letter from a Birmingham jail about the African-American pursuit of the American Dream. He said, quote, "We will win our freedom because the sacred heritage of our nation and the eternal will of God are embodied in our echoing demands. When these disinherited children of God sat down at lunch counters, they were in reality standing up for what is best in the American dream and for the most sacred values in our Judeo-Christian heritage, thereby bringing our nation back to those great wells of democracy which were dug deep by the Founding Fathers in their formulation of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence," end quote. I don't see Dr. King's letter on the syllabus, yet I see Hoagland's America, which is an anti-capitalist poem that starts by calling the America a maximum security prison, as spoken from the perspective of a student. The American dream as a unifying pursuit doesn't seem to be the intent of the course. Why is that? Some of the literature on this syllabus are indeed great literary works, but to call the course American Studies does disservice to the goal of unifying our students' own pursuit of the American dream. Don't we want that for our children?
Thank you. Amy, can I just clarify something? Sure, so the first purchase orders for any of those books were issued in September, so September of 20, after it was approved by the board. Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying. Okay.
And also, just to clarify, it is not a new course, and it is an elective.
Yep, agreed. Thank you.
Right.
Go ahead, Mr.
Hi, Greg Lemberg, 528 Grove Street. Here to talk about the Edison project. I'm actually pinch hitting for Chris Anelli, who couldn't be here tonight. He was mentioned earlier. He built a financial model to look at the alternatives to the Edison Field project, and I'm going to try and walk you through. Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to blast through to slide number 3 because there's a lot to do in 3 minutes. So the proposed project is currently about $9 million to get 2 synthetic fields behind Edison. And that is way outside the norms of any other project that we've come across in New Jersey or elsewhere. It's about 2.6 times higher than what the normal cost would be. So we're really struggling to understand that, and this will be relevant a little bit later. Even considering the standard costs, forgetting about the $9 million price tag, if you look at the cost of synthetic fields of this size versus one of the best quality grass options, in a 10-year life cycle, you end up at $2.8 million more costly for synthetic fields than for natural grass, which is 39% more. So it's really a head scratcher as to why this is being pursued. Slide 4 is some detail about how the model was built. It was very rigorous. I've been through it myself. He did a really, really good job. Slide 5 talks about different types of fields, so not only synthetic, but then how different types of grass fields are created or constructed. They're the 4 that are down the left-hand side. And most of them they all involve drainage of some sort or another. And then they involve either native soils or sand in one way, shape, or another. And there's costs associated with them. What you'll see also on that same slide is that what the equivalent option would be for a grass field in terms of how many square feet could you build and break even after 10 years. So we're getting 240,000 square feet in the Edison project. You could get 445,000 square feet, nearly double, with this sand cap and drainage option, which is quite expensive for a grass field. 650,000 square feet for the next lower down, and 730. So you're talking about, instead of getting 2 fields, anywhere from 4 to 9 fields, depending on what size the field happens to be and which option you pick. So we really feel that very strongly that there are alternatives to what is being proposed that are more cost effective. I'm going to skip through. So slide 6 talks about some facts and fiction about playable hours. Slide 7 talks about the things that are really needed to properly maintain grass fields. This is after extensive discussions with sports turf managers, not only from New Jersey, but elsewhere in the U.S., all professional certified in their craft. So really this becomes a matter of question of choices. Should we be, not investigating grass fields as an option where we might get more for our money? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jill Baker Vogel. I live on Baker Avenue. I must be hallucinating. Like, multiple parents in this town got up and read disgusting pornography and regarding rape, incest, the N-word, pedophilia, of a book that's currently in use in your high school that you have oversight on. And afterward, you just sit here and talk about, like, oh, maybe we should just table this one curriculum and, how do I do emotion and whatever. Whereas the response should have been, this book is in our schools, we need to remove it immediately, look into who's teaching it, and maybe there should be disciplinary action coming afterward. This is where we need to be regarding books like this in our schools. I think every parent here has a right to be angry at the lack of action of this board regarding what is going on in our schools. It's going on in the kindergartens, it's going on in the high schools. There's no action taken. We come in, we ask questions, we have to file Oprah requests because you won't answer our emails. We never get responses from any of our questions at the board meetings, never. We walk out of here like there's nothing that's forthcoming. The schools deny our request to opt our students out of certain topics. I don't know what we have to do in order to start getting answers to our questions. And another incident. We found out in the elementary schools through a system called EPIC that this book, it's called An ABC of Equality, was being read in an elementary school classroom. It might have been read in multiple ones. It was used as an activity. It should be called the ABCs of Inappropriate Topics for Young Children. I'm going to read some of the pages. G is for gender. Gender is a category that describes being a boy, a girl, both, neither, non-binary, and other identities. L is for LGBTQIA. LGBTQIA is a short description of a range of identities to describe lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, intersex, and asexual. It's okay to be whoever you want. S is for sex. When a baby arrives, the doctor will say it's a boy or a girl depending on their understanding of the baby's body. That is their sex category. T is for transgender. Sometimes the sex given by the doctor at birth might not fit with who the person is. A male baby may have been assigned the boy category, but their gender is that of a girl, or perhaps no gender assignment at all. Z is for Zay. Z-E. That's how they spell it. They is a way to refer to someone instead of using he or she, because there are lots of different genders. This ABC book doesn't even use real words to depict the ABCs. This is what's in our schools, and you need to all step up and start monitoring what's coming into and out of our schools, because we're angry about it and we have a right to be so, and we need answers to our questions.
Emily Barker, Longfellow Avenue. Firstly, to Jill's point, I would like to publicly make a suggestion that I discussed with Dr. G over email. We all recognize that there's a need for better communication between the Board of Ed and the community, so my suggestion, which incidentally came from the NJEA, is for the district to host Q&A forums throughout the year so that the public could have a place to pose questions and get real-time answers, since the Board of Ed meetings don't allow for such communication. Between the changes in the curriculum, the rules regarding quarantine, remote instruction, various mandates, it would be a very welcome addition to our community, and I believe it would increase trust and communication in our town. Secondly, I would like to address the ABCs of Equity book that is being used in the elementary school classes in our town. It's a book that crosses the line for me as a parent. In the YouTube read aloud of this book, which is on EPIC, P is for privilege, and the reader says, be aware of your advantages. Privilege is when a human being, specifically a white human being, receives advantages based on a category like gender or class, or an ability like seeing or hearing. Another one that Jill had mentioned, S is for sex. Z is for ze, which apparently serves an alternative for he or she like they. How is this appropriate for elementary school students? The purpose of this book being assigned to a class in school serves one purpose: indoctrination. With this choice of book, the school district crosses the line from school to parenting. It is my responsibility as a parent to teach my child the ways of the world at this age. If a teacher is going to teach an alphabet book in order to teach the alphabet, there are many more appropriate age alternatives. This book does not seek to teach the alphabet. It seeks to take over my child's parenting and expose them to things I am not comfortable with him being taught in school. These are things that me, as a parent of an elementary school-aged child, I have the right to teach myself. The teacher, the board, the school district, all these people have no right to cross that line. This book is currently freely available on EPIC. It's at least in the 3rd and the 5th grade levels, if not more. Those are the only ones I was able to check. I strongly urge this board to carefully consider the book choices made in this district. You were elected to represent the views of all of the parents in this town. The parents are awake, and they do not like what is being pushed in their schools.
Good evening. My name is Maria Tadaro. I live at 758 Knollwood Terrace. I'm here to speak about the Edison project, but before I do that, I'd like to just say that I totally agree with the parents here that spoke about the issue of books. I know that's just a comment I wanted to make. The question of the fields is not whether or not we need or want more playable fields, because we all recognize the value of sports in children's lives. So all of the points of discussion and disagreement really have to do with how we get to that common objective, how we accomplish that. I think what needs to be something that needs to be considered is what motivates the different factions and what the priorities are of the different factions. We hear that people saying how far they have to go to drive to the fields, how fields are unplayable after heavy rain, how many fields we have compared to other towns, what an embarrassment our fields are compared to other towns. And some of this is very understandable as a parent who had children who played sports and whose husband refereed and coached sports. We had to deal with many of these same things. So I understand where these people, where they're coming from. But the drive should not be fields at any cost. And this is why we have craft members and others who want better fields, but who prioritized the kids' safety and health, the health of our environment, and who note the serious economic concerns as well. Not just the economic concerns of the installation of the fields, but the looming economic concerns when it comes time to replace them. Craft wants better thought out plans to mitigate the many potential problems of the current plans. They question the use of a product laden with known carcinogens and having night games which are sure to exacerbate the problems that already exist as a result of this area hosting more than its fair share for the benefit of town sports teams. And Crafts wants the town to seriously consider the many options available to us to accomplish our common objective. We want the smaller neighborhood natural grass fields maintained.
Time's up. Are you almost done? Can you just finish?
I'm almost done.
Just a sentence.
A sentence or two?
Just a sentence, please. Yes.
Okay, we want we want to improve the existing fields and not follow a narrow agenda and the cosmetics of big sports complex with lots of lights, lots of action, and lots of fields all in the same location.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I know 3 minutes comes up quickly when you have a lot to say, and but we get it.
I just wanted to address the embarrassment thing.
Understood.
It's really embarrassing.
Okay. All right. Okay, so seeing no one else for public comment, I would just say, looks like we have a little bit of research that we're going to do between now and our next meeting. Learn a little bit more about how a book that seems rather alarming to some parents has been in use without evident damage to students, but obviously there's more we can learn about that. Yeah, just to clarify about the fields, still quite a ways to go before there is any vote, any final plan that we'll be looking at. So, you know, we hear you, we continue to hear you, and we appreciate the input that we've heard from parents. Does anybody have anything else they wanted to add with regard to public comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone coming, and I think it's important for us to have this open democratic process and have everyone speak. But I just want to note that there are 30,000 people in Westfield. Mm-hmm. There are 6,500 students. And, you know, one of the challenges of being on the board, which is an elected position, and we just had elections, and I think, you know, elections reflect the political will, at least of those who can and choose to vote. But one of the challenges is making sure that we take into consideration everyone's views, not just those who are able to attend and willing to attend the board meetings, though we do appreciate their presence and their voices.
Yes. Okay. Okay. No, you're good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So again, our next board meeting is December 5th. We are going to adjourn the public portion of the meeting if the board will approve the following resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education move into private session for the purpose of discussing matters rendered confidential by state and federal law, including harassment, intimidation, and bullying incidents. And be it further resolved that any discussion held by the board which need not remain confidential and the results of the discussion will be made public as soon as practicable. Could I have a second? Second. Okay, I'll pick Layla because I saw her. All in favor of adjourning to public? To private? I'm sorry, I've done that before. So adjourning to private now. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.